Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I'm Dr. Randall George Zazawa. They call me the bounce back blind guy, and welcome to New Enlightened Lifestyle Medicine. Everyone, say hello to, this is September. Say hello to co-host Patrick Herbert. Hi, Patrick.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, we have I don't know. There is a great announcement today besides the wonderful guests we have, but Patrick is starting his own show. So can you fill us in on that and tell us when it's starting?
Very soon, actually. It was because I spent a lot of time hijacking Dr. Randall's show for topics that I was interested in. So I figured why not? And I got a little encouragement from some friends and Carissa too. We were talking about this because I was going to have Chris on as my first guest. And so, yeah, it's just going to be called the Patrick Herbert Show and just going to, start doing it. Now that I have all the lights and green, screen and all that stuff, it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, how wonderful. And like I said, it's a no better name for the show. And everyone, please tune in and subscribe, to this show because, the guy is, like you've seen here with our new show here, it's he brings truth and honesty to all of you. And, to me, he's a true researcher and journalist because, one, he tells the truth and he brings all these facts to you that you should know. So when his show finally gets online, please subscribe and tune in, tell your friends because, he brings great content. And you know what, too, is that he cares. He cares about you folks out there. He may not know you, but he cares. And I think that's very important because especially what's been brought out now with this current COVID fake thing is that you find that people have been conditioned or led to not care. And that they put fear ahead of knowledge, and look at us now, okay? And so anyway, please tune in or subscribe to Patrick's show when it comes on, and thanks to Patrick, we have this great, wonderful guest. Many of you know her already, Carissa Conti, and what she's going to be talking about, what they're going to be talking about, because I am a student here, is on negative forces. But before I let everyone kind of take off here, what I know about Carissa is that from just volumes of things that Patrick sent me, and I learned quite a bit from her, and I'm going to learn even more today. But what I did know, find out about her is of her abysmal upbringing. And how she worked her way out of that, because what you'll find in an abusive childhood is that a lot of those kids can't work their way out because not only are they developing physically but emotionally, intellectually, and a lot of them that don't respond in a positive way. She did. And that is amazing to me because no help, basically no hope, and no guide, to bring her forward, because that's what we have parents for, right? And she didn't do that. And so a testimony to her strength and her will and her want to study and research things. Why? Why did this happen? And so that's why I'm so just grateful to have her, on the show. And thanks to Patrick. And then she's going to do a lot, more. And, please look up her stuff also. And then we're going to probably have links to that too. But Carissa, welcome. And like I said, just so grateful that you're on the show. And so before you really get started here, can you give the NILM audience a little bit of your background from as far back as you can remember to, what's brought you here currently? So, just a little bit of a bio sketch of you. So a lot of the audience can know who you are.
Sure. And thank you for having me on your show, by the way. All right. Well, I'll just try to keep it succinct. I don't want to give the wrong impression to viewers. In terms of my childhood, I was well provided for, but there were psychological issues with both of my parents. So the best way to describe it would be my mom had a very severe form of borderline personality disorder. So I know you, Dr. Randall, are well versed in psychology and that sort of thing, so it might be of interest to you. But she was borderline personality disorder, which I didn't realize until I was an adult, and then it explained everything. My dad had his own issues, but he was a good provider. But what started, I think, me in general being on the radar of stuff, going all the way back to childhood, could very well have tied into my dad. I don't have absolute definitive proof, but he had been working in 4 years in military intelligence, working for the NSA during Vietnam. And from things that he has told me, it seemed like he had been experimented on. Maybe things were done to him. And I think in my belief is that, for military intelligence personnel, oftentimes the stuff that's doing the experiment, they do look at their spouses or future spouses and children and kind of carry on any experimentation. So I think that's may have started how I, was partly on the radar. But there also seemed to have been alien things in the mix as well. So, I can't, say for sure where the source of that is coming from, other than possibly on a soul level, being on their radar before you even come here. It's very complicated. But so I seem to have had abductions going all the way back into my childhood, as noted in my book, Chasing Phantoms, which I might make reference to several times in this interview. And just so listeners know that it is free. It's a free PDF download. So I'm not trying to market the book. Anyone can read it for free. But so going back into early childhood, I had, possible alien. There was, possible being on the radar. It's called MILABS, military abductions, when it's, the military is involved with basically MK programming. So I have a lot of indicators of MK programming as well. So, but otherwise my life was basically normal on the surface, just going to school and living my life. Middle-class parents, some weirdness with their personalities and their way of raising me and my brother and their behavior towards us. But yeah, and I didn't realize what was going on, I think, in my own situation fully until my very late 20s. I had an awakening that's a lot like Patrick's. I mean, it's different, but it's kind of the same, and that it just kind of almost happened overnight. It was like all these things just kind of converged together and it exploded. Like my reality just took a whole new direction almost overnight. And it was like something decided, okay, it's time for you to wake up and time for, let's get down to business here. It's time to start doing what you came here to do, like on an incarnational level. So it's kind of very similar to Patrick. We have that in common, just this sudden sort of awakening. And we even share some of the things in common. You've mentioned David Icke being integral, and I have a strange thing that happened with me as well involving the whole David Icke thing. So just my awakening kind of happened. It started 2001, basically. Well, it was in 2000. I have a write-up on my website called The Vortex, and it was about my year spent living in what I call the paranormal apartment from hell, where I was roommating with my brother. And that's kind of actually where the awakening started. And that we may touch on a lot of this during our interview, because that is what introduced me to the fact that the paranormal is real. Like when I first moved into the apartment, I was coming out of a 3-year period of being an atheist trying to be an atheist. And I say trying because it just makes life easy. Like you don't have to try to explain anything. It's just, there's nothing, you don't have to explain it, and life is simple. But so I first moved into this apartment. I'm basically an atheist, trying to be. And by the end of the year, it was a full year, May of 2000 to May of 2001, I was a full-blown believer, a knower of the paranormal, supernatural, and my life has never been the same. And then so that was the first step. And then 2001 is kind of almost like a step-by-step process. That's when I started to learn I was an actual abductee. And I did have a childhood interest in the weird, reading lots of books about UFOs and aliens. And just anything weird in general, ghosts and the paranormal. But as far as I was concerned, I didn't have that stuff happening to me as far as I knew, but apparently I did. It was just kind of under the radar. I didn't yet know. And there, in retrospect, there was just tons of indicators of things I didn't understand or recognize, sometimes even suppressed memories. So yeah, 2001, and that's when I became aware that I'm an actual abductee. But even then, I realized that the alien abductee thing doesn't really necessarily fit me, because what I was seeing in some of my flashes when I was remembering things, there was people. I call them the white coats. So the people in the white coats, there's people involved. It's not really necessarily always aliens. And that was very confusing because I wasn't seeing that mentioned in abduction literature. And that's where Tom came across a book called MILABS by Dr. Helmut Lammer and I guess his wife, Marion Lammer. And that was a big, like, light bulb moment, because that's where it's describing military abducting people in that whole thing. And that seemed to more line up with what I was seeing in my head as well. So that was a huge breakthrough moment in my journey of awakening to figure out who I am and what's really going on here. So then I kind of realized, yeah, I'm an abductee, and it's not just aliens, there's people involved. And then, you know, so throughout 2002, 3, and 4, while we were living in Fort Lauderdale, it was kind of like my whole reality exploded. All hell broke loose. We had paranormal stuff, just probably the peak of my abductions in terms of I was being taken on a regular basis. Just my whole reality just kind of blew up in that regard, all of which I talk about on my site, all the different types of things that were going on. Black helicopters, harassing, waking up with the marks on my body that weren't there when I went to sleep, different flashes of things, like remembering being in facilities, places that look like, I've described it as, if anyone's ever seen that 1983 movie called War Games, and it takes place inside NORAD, they show it kind of look a little bit like that. It's like a facility, like a government facility with gangways, you know, metal gangways and things like that. Also places look like hospitals. So I'm seeing like all these different things in my head, these flashes of that. And I got the black helis, and, you know, just everything was exploding in my reality. And it was a precarious time period because I could easily have gone off the rails with fear and paranoia. And that's actually kind of, once stuff erupts in your reality, if they're making themselves overtly known to you, that's kind of a lot of times what they're aiming for. It's like a campaign of harassment to get you just scared all the time, paranoid, and just the lowest possible frequency that you could be vibrating on, just to basically derail you and kind of take you out of the picture. And so my life could easily have just been derailed at that point. So I kind of do really credit Tom with helping to keep me grounded. He's the voice of reason. He's someone who's very knowledgeable about these subjects, but keeps a calm head and, you know, is very logical and rational. And so I really do credit him with, you know, keeping me on the right path. And, you know, here I am today, and I really do kind of credit him for that. And I know I've helped him along the way as well. So we've helped each other. But yeah, that was a very precarious time period. And I had a realization that happened one night about the fear frequency. And it was brought to my attention that, yeah, there are thems that are behind a lot of what's happening in my life. And it is to keep me in, you know, a state of fear all the time. So once that was revealed to me, it lost all its power overnight. Like I couldn't be scared of this stuff anymore. When you know there's a man behind the curtain orchestrating it, how do you, it's like a joke at this, it's like, oh, whatever. So like literally overnight, it was almost like a 180 frequency shift from fear and almost like helplessness and, you know, just feeling powerless to, oh, okay, I get it. And that just turned the tables. That was the beginning of going from what could have potentially been the derailed timeline to where I am now. And so I was able to get pretty much all of the negative harassment that was happening, like from black helicopters to entities that were coming around, like bothering me in the middle of the night, all this stuff to just stop almost completely stop overnight. So that's been a big message that I put forth throughout my entire website and in my book, because I've lived it and I know it's real. I know that they're, harassing people and trying to keep people scared, trying to derail as many people as possible from waking up, especially if they're a threat in some way. And, but it is possible to fight back. And I did it. And that's what, I talk about on my website, give people tactical advice, and techniques that they can employ, things that work for me, and try to empower them to realize you're not helpless. Like, these things are not all powerful. We absolutely can fight back. And I believe we have more power than them. They're relying on ignorance. They're relying on us not knowing what we're capable of and who we really are, and giving them more credit than they deserve. So that's been a huge message throughout my website and book as well. And that's just the summary. There's so much more, but I don't want to, I could talk for 2 hours.
No, it's okay. It's one of the things that I thought was really interesting, given how similar our stories are, and how Tom was integral in both our lives. And how from my perspective, from my experience, I was led to him synchronistically. And then, back to what I was saying, one of the things that was really interesting to me was you lived all the places where I was born and grew up. And I was born in Mission Viejo. I lived in Lake Forest. My parents lived at Lake Forest at the time. I have lived in Laguna Niguel, and also where I would spend a lot of time considerably with my families. We would go to Disneyland frequently in Anaheim. And that's literally everywhere that you lived in California, like exactly. And so when you told me that, I was like, well, cool. That's totally cool, because that, I know all those places so intimately. And that just blew my mind. And then also, all the other, how this happened to us. And it's just like you. You said, it was like your life task activated. That was exact same with me. And I was led to material that told me, yes, at 35, I was beginning my life task. And I was 35 when I read that. And like, while all this stuff is going on. So it's, both you and I, and many others, of course, but for the purposes of this show, we're speaking from personal experience. And it's not like it's something that we both, you didn't grow up as a little kid and go like, I'd just love to do a video on negative forces, or, you know what I mean? Like, so it's like, because there's a stigma attached to people who put themselves out there like this, because of course we're up against those who don't have the experience. And to them, we might just sound like science fiction, but to us, it's real. So, all right, well, let me go ahead. Dr. Randall, dude, before we dive into her tremendous outline over here, you want to go back?
No, I'll just say, do a few words here and let you guys go. But see, that's why I wanted her on the show, and you introduced, her and Tom to me, is that, when we first, started chatting, when, I used the word synchronicity a lot, and I didn't think anyone even knew that name. That word, right? But you do, and you use it often. But for what Chris has done is that she's given light to negative forces. And when you look at people around the world, especially in Buddhism or everyday folks here, a lot of people in psychology or in psychiatry, what we'll say for people that come to see them, say that there's a lot of craziness out there. People are just crazy, okay? And so, there's a sect in Buddhism that studies irrational behavior for their entire lives as Buddhists. I go, wow, what a weird thing to do. But see, what you've done and what Chris has done is that she shows these behaviors and how people think and feel. And all of a sudden, our world has developed something called psychology around all this stuff. And then they put it in textbooks, and that's what you learn. But what both of you have indicated is, things like what's the unknown, what's in past lives, what if there are aliens? How come we can't explain things? And why in psychology are there names that are given to things, but we don't know why? And so I think for Carissa, she's done all this research and experienced it herself. That's why I like people's life stories, because unless you walk in someone else's shoes, you have no clue. You have no clue what they're going through or what they're feeling. And also that's why I'm glad she's here, because I think for a lot of those folks watching, and this video will be online after you finish all the editing with it. But people would like to know why the heck they are the way they are, and why they feel they feel the way they feel. Because some goes, I think I'm crazy. I do crazy things. I don't know why. So anyway, just from that, please go ahead and educate us all.
Okay, well, we have, thanks to Carissa, Carissa and I have actually been going back and forth, and we put together an item list about subjects we want to tackle. And these are all related to negative forces, including our own experiences. So some of the subjects we're gonna talk about are what are negative forces, why are some people on negative forces radar, what are the ways in which negative forces attack us, as well as what are the ways in which we can identify incoming attacks, which is incredibly important because, as we always say, awareness to them is everything. What are the ways in which we could mitigate negative forces attacks? This is also incredibly important. And I know a lot of people are going to be watching this show. I know people that I know personally who have trouble with negative forces, who are actually aggressively asking me when this was coming about, when we were going to talk about this, because I told them, look, we're going to bring up some subjects that I know my personal friends are having trouble with, and some of them are trying to understand this as well. So, and the last one is, what are the preventative measures? What are ways that we can prevent negative forces from attacking us? And that's usually, for the most part, related to our frequency and as you said, lifestyle habits and such. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive right in. So what are negative forces? And of course, the summary information on this is we know about multiple forms, non-physical entities from astral parasites up to demons. We have other names, of course, for demons. There's Archons, there's the Jinn, there's the Flyers, there's, different names across different cultures. Psychic attacks. And one of the things I do want to talk about and dive into is, what is a psychic attack? Because you say that word to somebody who doesn't really understand, and the one thing they'll think of is like, does that mean when the psychic person decides they no longer like you and want to kill you? So psychic attacks, and also including from negative oriented people, aliens, black ops, and the military abductions, as you had brought up. Okay, so let's go ahead and
yeah, and it's weird. So for people who aren't familiar with my work, I feel like I've had experiences with all of this stuff. It's really crazy. But the
That's
aliens,
why you're here.
the MILABS / white coats, which I have actually seen someone who was a military personnel, like a military brass in one of my flash memories. And then again, the actual paranormal and how that became part of my life. And then the thing about the paranormal is once it's in your life, it never seems to go away. It's like you're kind of tagged. It's almost like when humans find a wild animal, tag them and re-release them. It's like you're always on their radar for the rest of your life. So I've had experience with all of this stuff, as well as like psychic attacks from whether it was other people or stuff from other realms. So yeah, and you too. I mean, we know what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's why I'm really, and I was, before we started doing the show, I was just sitting there going, I was like, this is going to be really good, because I've been writing about this. You've written about it. It's a place where we could literally put our experience on the line and back up everything, what we're talking about, with information that's out there on the internet for people to get. And of course, we'll put that information on the screen for everybody. Okay, so non-physical entities, and so I personally know in my own experience of what I call electromagnetic parasites. And there's that label game that goes on. I call them Archons, but some other people will say they're not Archons or something else. And they could be anything from disincarnate entities to aliens, to, other types of multidimensional beings. And we as humans have given names like demon, and a lot of that comes from our mythology, which comes from the experience that those people had in the past. So let's go ahead and let's talk about the one thing that they seem to have in common, and the one thing that that I've learned, and I know you've learned this too from like Robert Monroe and such, is because we use the same terminology. But I heard the term Loosh from Monroe first. I don't know if it was ever in any other material before that, but so Loosh,
I don't think so. I think he coined it.
Okay, he did. Okay,
yeah, I always give credit to him, so I just
me too, exactly. Now, Loosh is the non-physical, or not physical. Loosh is the emotional energy that we leak, as I always explain it, whenever we have our chakras shutting down per a drop in our personal vibrations, and which is usually instigated from a psychic attack or a negative forces attack.
Mm-hmm.
Can you dive into that and talk about, like, when it comes to the energy that we leak, and how these parasitical entities feed on it? And another thing would be, one of the reasons I've always brought up a lot of times when I talk about it, and I know, and I've read some materials, is to why it is, and we know that this essentially functions as a Loosh farm. We've had this material, seen this material in Robert Monroe. We've seen this material, but Robert Bruce talks about all the people at this point in time. So, what do you know, Carissa?
Well, I don't know the exact mechanism that they all utilize, but I have a few experiences where I know that that's what was happening. Like, we'll probably touch on this later in the show, but like nocturnal Loosh feeding, where something like an entity, some kind of an astral or an entity of some sort thing, that it shows up in the middle of the night while you're sleeping, kind of directs where your dreams are going, and maybe puts it in a negative direction for fear or shock. And then it proceeds to kind of feed on that. One time I woke up and I was having a very aggressive dream where I was like, wow, aggro and riled up and, beating up somebody in the dream who was harassing me. And when I just suddenly woke up, because it's like you feel like someone's looking at you or something's watching you, and it pulled me out of my sleep state. And there was like this thing that was hovering over me while I was sleeping. It's like just a giant black circle, but with jagged edges. It's hard to describe, but when my eyes flew open, it jumped back like it wasn't expecting me to suddenly wake up, and then it started pulling away from me. But and I talk about that in this write-up on my website called The Vortex, which I also may cite from time to time, because that was the write-up where I get into real detail my paranormal experiences in that one apartment I referenced earlier. But that showed me, like, definitely there's a nocturnal feeding component where these things hover over you. Maybe just being in proximity, they can feed. I'm not sure. I think it's different for different beings. So the mechanisms may vary, but there's that. I think there's stuff that can feed just from where it is located in its own realm. Somehow it can connect to us and feed. And I actually think when it comes to the worldwide macro Loosh farm situation in general, that it's something like that, just kind of feeding on the population as a whole. And I don't understand the mechanism, but there's no doubt that much of what we're submersed in this reality is designed with Loosh feeding in mind. That's why our society and world is set up the way it is to maximize negative energy production. And then somehow they're able to kind of like feed on that from wherever they are. But then there is stuff that, can come into our own realms and with it being proximity and latch onto us and feed. There's Robert Bruce has talked about the phenomenon of hitchhikers. It's where, these entities come in and they attach themselves to people. And just like they want to ride in the world, they can't just go out into the world, but they can latch onto a human, and the human goes out into the world, and now they can experience it vicariously through the human, but they suck the energy off the human. It becomes like a parasite situation. I've seen proof for that. So that's why I endorse that. It's a real thing. I've witnessed that on my brother, that something like that happened to him. I could see it on him. And he verified that he knew it was on him, like attached to him as he was out in the world. And yeah, those things can drain as well. There's just so many different types of beings. I don't know. Do you have anything you want to contribute as well?
I know about the I've called them night crawlers, and this is something that I see mostly every night, and Rochelle sees it too. Her and I have about equal levels of perception when it comes to seeing this stuff, because we're always and we shared all of our awakening experiences together. And the great thing about that was, and after the fact, I used to think if she hadn't shared them with me, I would have thought I was going nuts. Because especially when it came to having visions just boom start happening, and she was there right by my side. Now she didn't see the visions, but I got to talk to her about them, and she ended up recording this stuff. And also with all the what you call woo woo stuff, all the I call it supernatural metaphysical things that happened, and hyper super synchronistic stuff we got to experience together. So she's in tune to it as well. So we get a chance to compare notes essentially every night, which is nice. And so yeah, we do see a lot of what we call the night crawlers. When it comes to our experience together, when it comes to Loosh, they attack her aggressively, and they do try to go through my daughter. And she always describes, she's able to talk about it a lot, and while she's also fighting this battle in her inner world, she's also able to discuss what's going on, and I'm able to work with her on this. And the circumstances that we go through when this starts to happen are so engineered that it's almost like it's a science to these entities that are doing this as farmers, let's just say. They don't miss a beat. And if the probability of a successful attack drops off per us or my intervention with her, it stops. And it's like, so they don't waste time. They don't waste energy. They don't sit there and try to go, like trying constantly when it's not working. And I am at times, I get even going through it all the time and experiencing it so much. I still am fascinated by it. I'm mind blown by it. I've had a back and forth with a lot of these aggressive attacks and entities, and sometimes when I'm able to perceive reactions or interactions with these non-physical beings, I have gotten distinct emotional feedback from them per our engagement. And it's not, sometimes it's been incredibly dark, morbid, vile, horrible, hatred-filled. Sometimes it's been, like I described it to you one time, it was kind of like touche. You figured it out. You were able to stop something that was going on, some sort of instigation or whatever. So it's just mind blowing to me. So I know that there's, and also some things that I'm able to see in my mind when demonic entities attack, I get incredibly creepy visuals. But they're fascinating. They're fascinatingly creepy because they're so, I don't even know how to words to describe it. And some of these entities that we may call demons, some of the ones that I've encountered that are more, like I told you one time in one experience, the room frequency dropped and then something came in and I had this impression in my mind of it. And it was almost like a machine. And it was like a really creepy machine is what it felt like. Cold, deterministic. It was there for a specific reason. So, we have these different levels and different types. And you point that out over here on, because when we're talking about non-physical entities, there's not just one or two, there's not just Archons, there's not just the Loosh farmers. There's like a whole hierarchy of entities.
And my definition, I just say it's basically a non-human being or entity that oftentimes resides normally in a different realm from us. Some people refer to that as a density or, maybe a dimension, depending on the terminology that people like to use. But it's not here in our physical reality necessarily. And which has basically some kind of, I'd say, malicious intent towards humans. Sometimes these things can be physical and they are operating here as well and in our realm, but it's just basically something that doesn't have humans' best interests in mind. It's oftentimes feeding on us or trying to mess with us and derail our lives. So there's, several different motivators that these things have. Some seem to just really want to matter-of-factly feed, almost like we're just an all-you-can-eat buffet to them, and it's nothing personal. And they just do what they got to do to get us to produce that negative Loosh, whether it's anger, fear, even like the dark aspects of sex. But then you have the ones that are like, really, they're targeting you. It's personal. Like, it is about you personally. And they're trying to hurt you and derail you and your life mission or just mess with your life. And there's multiple reasons for that about why they've got it out against you personally. And we'll touch on that as well. But I think those are the two main things that I've been able to determine is feeding and then targeting. And sometimes those two can overlap, but they can also be distinct.
That's awesome. One of the things that when I told you about it was marked by a demon, that was an incredible experience, and it happened when I was lucid and transitioning from my sleeping state into my awakening state, and whispered directly in my ear. I could feel it. It said marked. And I had this visual It was like, it was a wireframe rendering of a demonic head that was put on my back as a tattoo, and then with lines that were jagged coming down my arms. And the tattoo was this fluorescent purple, and this facial that it did with lines, the face was incredibly creepy. It was really, and it was just, it really stuck in my head, and then the whispering, and then my reality for a good 5 days until I was able to raise my personal frequency with help. I needed help on that one. And I asked for help, and I actually got it with positive visualizations that were injected in me as visions. And I could feel the thing burning off along with the visualization of it burning off. But the realism of it was, and then the experience afterwards was just incredible. One of the things I want you to talk about with us is, and so a lot of people have trouble in this area too, and it's, I'm always looking for other ways to explain this. A lot of times the term alien, which is the name we give the hyperdimensional creatures and entities that we encounter, a lot of people get confused because there's, first of all, we're talking about archons, demons, this and these entities. And then we're over here talking about, Greys, Nordics, or you look at other alien, names and civilizations, so that are out there. And you've got, of course, the famous reptilians. Who could forget about that? So how do these two negative groups relate? Are they essentially the same, or are they different variations of reality? And then, that variations of multidimensional reality would be the better way of saying it.
I think it's the latter of what you just said. I used to kind of was leaning towards the idea that maybe aliens are all like aliens as people understand them to be in terms of like grays and mantids and all that. We're just some sort of interdimensional being, that they're not flying here in spacecraft from other planets or galaxies. But now I'm back to thinking, that there are probably some that might be not from Earth. I don't know what their story is, but that it is something separate from demons, archons, the jinn, whatever, that sort of thing. There's, these non-physical or interdimensional stuff native to Earth. I think reptilians, from what I understand, are something that's also native to Earth. They're not from another planet, not necessarily interdimensional. I don't know. But then there might be these separate aliens. But the thing they all have in common, of course, is not, don't have positive intents towards humans. They don't think very highly of us a lot of the time. We're something that they use, whether it's for, energy food, physical food, which a lot of people don't want to hear. That's a pretty scary topic. Experimentation, genetic stuff, the reproduction things, which that's what the aliens tend to seem obsessed with and I've known people personally who seem to have that going on. The hybrid breeding program, it's a whole separate thing. It doesn't really relate too much to what we're talking about here, but it's just something negative being done to humans, though, that against our will. So I do think they're separate, and they each have their own agenda. Some of it overlaps, but I do think the aliens can be separate.
Which so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut
you
off.
No, I'm done.
No, that totally makes sense because, and some of the, experiences that you and I and Tom have shared with each other regarding interactions with aliens. We see them physically. We see that there's a physical interaction here. I saw a UFO above my head when I was 11. It was a very physical thing. And I've also since then, as an adult, seen other, UFOs and stuff like that from a distance, of course, not so intimately as that one was. So I guess another question, it naturally leads itself to the next section, and I'll go ahead and dive into that. We can bring up or talk about metaphysical contracts, but I think that might need a little bit of a backing situation. I want to go ahead and run with the momentum that we have on pinning down these forces and giving them an identity now that people could have in their awareness. So one of the reasons, or one of the things that we should, dive into is why are some of us like, and it's obvious for us, we know why, because of what we do. And that's one of the reasons why we're attacked, because they don't want their gig. They don't want to give up their gig. They don't want it to be out there. So they are constantly interfering with people who want to attack. So why are some people on negative forces radar?
Multiple reasons. like you said, like you're here on a positive life mission, so they're attacking you for that. But I will have to say, for me, I didn't realize for many years that this was the reason why so many things had come at me in life. So it took until I was maybe well into my 30s to kind of figure it out and start putting it all together. Once I had a website and a book and everything, and started realizing the effect I was having, then it started to make more sense about why so much stuff was coming at me. And it wasn't even just about what I was doing individually. It was the help I gave to Tom to help him become, make the most of who he is, and us working together. And it's the whole thing combined. It's just, that's why I had a bullseye on my back.
Sounds like Rochelle.
So
like
that's yeah. So you and Rochelle and your situation, it's the same thing. So
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no. So yeah, the positive incarnational mission thing is a big reason. Another thing that I've figured out is, a person's frequency is a match for this sort of thing. So they keep attracting in negative people and circumstances, and even actual negative entities that are working through people to harass them and stuff. And something I've noticed, there's a pattern a lot of the times to these people who have this happening, and myself included, is you may have childhood abuse or some severe level of bullying in your background. And as I've noticed, it kind of imprints a frequency onto you of the persecuted scapegoat, the person who's getting knocked around in life. And, you'll see that these people oftentimes as adults will attract in negative abusive partners or, friends, even job situations, which I recently wrote about. They'll attract in negative jobs with, bad coworkers and bosses that are treating them bad. Because they're a match for that. It's a frequency match, like attracts like, but they're also pulling in negative forces who see it, the easy feed fest on these people to, target them and harass them. So I think the frequency match, like attracting like, and that's a big one I've written about all over my website, because I just see how that really applies. And I feel like once you realize if that's your situation, which it has been with me, and you see that, you can work on that, and you can really help reduce the amount of negative people and circumstances and entity attacks that you're drawing into yourself in life. So that's another reason as well. Another thing I put forth was, I think there can be maybe karmic entanglements. Not everyone's going to believe in past lives. I realize that, so it might be a little controversial to put out there. I do. I've seen evidence for it as a kid, for instance, having memories of a life that was not this one. So I see evidence for that. So I think, and I've been told by several people that there was stuff going on in my other lives that are tying into this life in terms of being on the radar of some neg stuff. So I think karmic entanglements from other lives carrying over into your current life, that could be the situation for some people, maybe not everyone, but I think in my case, that might be some of what's happening as well. So karmic entanglements. And as I noted, basically, I think the entire population in general is on neg's radar because the nature of what this reality is. If it's a Loosh farm, then we're all on some level on their radar, and the whole world is serving them for energy production.
That's true.
And not even just energy production, but the really negative aspect, but is the human sacrifice component, and that's where it gets really dark. But
and you have to also think about growing up, you learn about things like Murphy's Law, and it's also subconsciously imprinted on you that life is nothing but a struggle. And so that, that is obviously that psychological element would be a big part of this game here, where, the reality that we experience is structured in a way so that we are imprinted with all of this negativity in our subconscious mind. And therefore, as we grow up, manifest a lot of all of this into our reality. And because on the back end, it's designed that way so that they can get a maximum amount of Loosh out of it. And as I Loosh farm, that makes that makes a perfect sense why. And, my mom had one time in college, she said, she asked her professor with something along the line of like, what is life or whatever. And he was like, life is later, like I said, life is nothing but a struggle, or like, you know, just like, and that's to an impressionable college student, right? And like, oh, yeah, great. That's a real positive way of looking at things. You have to actually go through something or have an invested interest in the positive aspects of humanity in order to get there. Your entire reality that you are experiencing is one that is framed in this whole negative framework for a very purposeful reason. And a lot of that also has to do with what we, you know, in conspiracy levels will call the control system that's in place. And part of that is attached to the multidimensional agenda, or, you know, alien and negative forces agenda. So, and where we have elements of what I always call the cabal, or what David Icke will call the cult, is that are the human representation of those dark forces that exist in the shadow. And even though, as I always say to people will talk about the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, and you know, I'll borrow a line from Star Wars where he says, "There's always a bigger fish," and it's true. They've got bosses, and everybody has a boss. So,
and I have to say that is actually why I originally was drawn to David Icke's material, and why I, you know, years back I was such a big fan, because he's one of the few conspiracy authors that took the conspiracy all the way to the top. He didn't just stop at the physical. He was very rare in that regard. Nobody was really talking about what he was saying. And I'm not saying I subscribe to every belief he's ever put out there, but he was right in that there's these higher dimensional things that are on top of the physical earth cabal stuff. You know, it doesn't end with the physical. So that's kind of how I measure the worth of any conspiracy material, is if it just stops at the physical and never goes beyond.
You never get anywhere. That's the thing.
You're chasing your tail.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
you never get anywhere.
It goes, yeah. So it goes to all the way to the top of his material. That's why I was a fan of that for many years.
I think I like from my perspective, and since I wasn't into any of this until I was 35 and went through a radical supernatural awakening, the radical supernatural awakening. Sorry. Just putting all sorts of different spins on it. Every time I talk about it, it's just kind of I'm amusing myself. So, you know, I appreciate all efforts that have been made to expose, you know, a lot of truth is subjective. I mean, at the end of the day, pretty much, you know, and it's two people sharing a subjective experience that adds more truth to it in a way. You know, I don't want to get all like philosophical or Patrick philosophy. But it's like we all have to use our discernment. If we're not using our discernment, we'd might as well be let off a cliff. You know, that's you know. So it's David Icke puts out the truth that he believes it's his truth, and others put out their truth, and you know, we all kind of look at what's jiving with our own personal experiences and stuff like that. But all of it was a big part of at least my personal story, just like you. And I was led to David Icke in a supernatural way, just like you were. And so that is funny. I was going to bring up the mole thing, but that's my inside joke. Did I tell you that one?
What were you going to bring up?
I have a mole in the same spot on my right cheek that David Icke does.
Oh, yeah.
So Rochelle and I joke a lot, when I used to walk around going and push it and then pretend to talk to David and update him on the conspiracy. Just like stupid, silly couple stuff. I would do it in an English accent too. Okay, so back to our list.
But I have to say really quick, I wanted just to point out, like earlier, you mentioned one time tapping into one of the neg energies that you were connecting into, and it felt like a computer almost. I found that really interesting when you mentioned that. I didn't know you had that experience, and I find that really interesting because you're not the only one saying that. Like I know Richard Sauter talks a lot about he's tapped into what he believes is the ultimate kind of controller over this reality. And it's something kind of AI.
Yeah, it has a very big feel like that. Like it's
very
mechanical.
Cold and mechanical. And just
cold and mechanical, exactly.
Yeah. So when you said that, I was like, ooh, so you're another one I haven't myself, but I'm always interested when I hear that people have tapped in, and that's what came back, that they felt something like that. I think that's important. I just wanted to highlight that you said that. Being
a software engineer, I can recognize that kind of, because when you program, you enter into sort of a mindset. And I used to do assembly language programming, which is right on the processor level. So I started to think like a machine at times in order to write good code. You have to. So I recognize and that's what I called cold, mechanical, and deterministic. But it was evolved in such an interesting and unique way. But that was still, there was no, there was, it was really, it's because I could feel it and I could visualize it again as I experienced it the other night. And it's really no way to really describe it except something out of like, maybe like Tron almost in a sense. Where it's evolved and it's a certain way, but at the end of the day, it's still a machine. It's really interesting. And I think a lot of those movies that capture that, they do it really well. I've also heard it been called as a system. You know, we hear about Saturn and we hear about the moon being a relay station for Saturn, and that the demiurge is a piece of artificial intelligence. And that makes perfect sense. It's almost as like perhaps an alien group had implemented this type of metaphysical hyper advanced artificial intelligence to maintain control of humanity, or to begin to maintain control of humanity. Okay, so let's let me jump over here on the other part. So we're going to dive over here into the ways, and we kind of covered a lot of this information as we've gone and talked, so we can add more to it. What are the ways in which negative forces attack us? And these get interesting because we know, and I just want to put this up before you begin talking about NPCs or, you know, as spiritless. I've also come across information, it was probably because of following Tom's stuff, Dr. Peter Beater talking about this in like audio tapes in the 60s, 70s perhaps, about the people that don't have a spirit. And Dr. Randall, please participate in this this segment. We'll call it a segment, because you have experience in this, and you know I pointed you to Tom's material too, and that, you know, that made you really opened up a whole different way of thinking about things. So
you have just by knowing you, and then I get to meet Carissa out of all this. And at first it was Tom, and then the poor guy, he's inundated with emails, so he finally answered mine. He goes, "Oh, I found yours. I have so many, you know." But no, he brought up the topic of you know, spirited, spiritless, and spirit asleep. And I go, you know, just that one simple statement, and go, oh, that makes a lot of sense. I know a lot of folks just from either patients or family members or people that are associated with my family. I go, you know, there's something missing in them. I don't know what it is, but it's not like these folks are just they purposely want to be assholes or defiant or things like that. There's something missing because you know, with both of you here, you hit someone with all the facts, all the neat psychology stuff that everybody reads, and it's like missing. And especially with this one kid here that I was you know, a family friend for, oh boy, he's 30 now, so you know, past 18 years, you know, he was one ADHD, like you, Patrick, but his parents are highly religious, especially his mother, so they put him to 2 exorcisms, the kid. And I go, wow. So I told him just jokingly, you know, some months ago when I last saw him, wow, it didn't work. Look at you. But you know, things like that. It's weird because you know, this one guy is you know, he chooses to be homeless, and you know, he chooses to do whatever he wants. And you know, every once in a while, my daughter will look up his Facebook things, and he's talking about yes, he found corona worms in him. I go, there's no such thing as corona worms, you know. And then from there he goes, yeah, you know, it's because of this infection I had when I had my nose piercing, you know, 5 years ago. I said, well, you know, that's a dermal thing that you're going to get infected at that time. But anyway, you know, all those kind of things. And it's strange to me because when you study graduate level psychology, you're going to delve into that DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. And then what Chris has become expert at is borderline personality disorder. You know, that's cluster B. And not that you want to be expert in it, but I also wonder what kind of things your mother had to go through, you know, to exhibit that symptom. Those past live, you know, things, traumas that you know, followed her. That you know, I don't think she was a willing acceptor of all this. It's just how that is. And then of course, you know, they, you know, your parents have you and your brother, but, you know, she's dealing with all this kind of stuff. And I mean, you know, it's, you know, not her fault. This is that, you know, she's living through karmic consequences. And I think they're all past lives. And then, you know, she doesn't know how to handle it. And it manifests it in these symptoms. And, you know, there's like 9 symptoms for borderline personality disorder, and for insurance billing, you just need 5 of them. And I go, okay, that's really strange to me. But it's, you know, no one explained why, how it happened. So that's what you're doing. And that's what, you know, Tom explained to me. And very, you know, he like you explains things, because I like explanations. So he's real busy, but he wrote this long email explaining things to me. I go, oh, okay. You know, and of course, a lot of stuff I forgot, so I had to write him back, and from there he rewrites it. He's such a nice guy, because I couldn't remember it all. But, you know, what I'm listening to here, and I'll let you guys get going here, too, is that it seems like when you talk about aliens, negative energy, and all these different types of interdimensional beings, or whatever you want to call them, if they're just negative energy, I would say, to me, that seems a normal occurrence in our lives, or how it was set up to be. And that has allowed us to thrive and to be who we are. And, you know, when I look at both of you, and especially, you know, you, Carissa, you've gone through a whole lot and you've researched a lot, just like Patrick has. I'd say that because of all the negative stuff out there, that's made you who you are. And I think that you're better and stronger because of it. So, you know, as an outsider looking in, I look at that. And so now, you know, you're become expert like Patrick and Tom, you know, in this invisible world. And this explains a lot of things, you know, to the average person, because, you know, a lot of folks go see counseling. They're stressed, or they don't know why they're not happy, or they go, oh, sometimes I just want to kill that fucker, man. I don't know why, but I just hate him, but I love him at the same time, kind of deal. And so, what you bring is answers here. And I'll let you go here. And after this thing that I've read, there's this psychiatrist named Scott Peck, and then he's deceased now, but he wrote the Road Less Traveled. And psychiatrist, you know, he says that in his practice, you know, there's 10% of the folks that I can't just figure out. There's something, you know, wrong. And then he mentioned the same thing. They're vacant. Something's missing. So, you know, he ended up attending some exorcism. He goes, wow, you know, I thought this was all fake and phony, but these people are really into it. And, you know, he saw all those things with the bed shaking and things falling off the, you know, the counters. Then he would hear the voice tones, you know. And he goes, it's like the movie, but it's scarier. And so, you know, he just in his books, he would say that those entities are all around us. They're part of us, and you know, within the people that are you might see, or be the people themselves, manifestations of that. They're there, except they look at life in a different way. Theirs is that you know, we look through, you know, the lens of, you know, perhaps the God that put us here. You know, love, caring, you know, just self-actualization, you know, things like that. They just want to do, you know, just bad things, because that's how they're programmed. That's what they do. But you know, that's my simplistic view of things. But you know, that's why I really wanted this, you know, this show to go on, because you know, both of you are so valuable here, and you tell a personal story, and it's real. It's real because you went through it, you lived through it, and you studied it. And so these are, and then I believe other people are feeling a lot of the same things, but they don't know who to talk to. and when you know, their families are probably going, wow, you're crazy, or God, even your psychologist says you're crazy. You know, and from there, where do you turn to? And you know, these people aren't crazy. That they're telling the truth, and that they're fearful, they're scared, and after a while you get hopeless and helpless, just like our current situation here with this ridiculous COVID thing. Fear, hopeless and helpless. Okay, and the government will save you because they know everything. Things like that. So I think what you two bring here is so valuable because it's personal experiences, plus it's researched. I mean, you're just not making conversation here, or you know, wanting to be cute or things like that. It's that, you know, you bring truth here, and I think this helps so many people. So anyway, I rambled on. Continue on.
No, it's all right. I just want to remind, because you had brought it up, Dr. Randall. on NPCs. So I'll go ahead and give the NPC portion of this over to Carissa.
Well, actually, what I wanted to touch back on, and which it ends up tying into NPCs, is the whole borderline personality disorder thing, Dr. Randall, because you had briefly mentioned it when you first started speaking.
Yeah.
I have an article I wrote on my site. It's called The Hidden Puppet Masters. And the whole reason I wrote that article was because I came across a book at Barnes & Noble, called Understanding the Borderline Mother. And it was by a woman named Christine Ann Lawson. And, she dissects the whole borderline personality disorder, but specifically with how, with mothers and how it affects their children. And she had so many details of just all the things that borderline mothers will say and do to their children. Like, it was all verbatim things me and my brother experienced growing up. Like, almost like she was a fly on the wall. It was creepy. It was like, you were there in my childhood. How do you know what she was saying to us and the things she was doing and her behavior? So it was, the entire book is all highlighted up, and I've got notes and all the it's ridiculous. The entire book should just be one giant highlight. And me too, yes. But that got me thinking. I began to realize, well, at what point does all this verbatim things that she did and said stop being a coincidence and start being something else? How is it that all these women all over the world, across time and geographic locations and different backgrounds, are all saying and doing the exact same word for word verbatim things? And I get there is a psychology component. And so my ultimate conclusion, bottom line, was that it's almost like a 50-50 thing. We're seeing people who had very bad backgrounds. And you mentioned that, yeah, my mom did have a very severe traumatic background. I would not wish her life on anyone. There's a real reason she became borderline. Abuse, trauma, abandonment. That's a key component of borderline. They're abandoned, usually at a very, very young age. So the core of their being is not well formed. They're always insecure. There's like PTSD and trauma from all the abuse. In her case, physical abuse. It was hinted at sexual abuse by her own, at least one of her brothers. It was just bad. Alcoholism, her mom was abusive to her, dad died. So, and just more and more stuff beyond that. So everything that could possibly go wrong happened between the ages of 2 and 16 for her, on top of severe drug use. So, you have a multi-fold component of psychological trauma, heavy alcohol and drug use on a still developing teenage brain. That's very detrimental to development. And what I believed happened was, and I believe this is the case for a lot of people with psychological disorders, not just borderline, what ends up happening is something, and not only does the mind fracture, but almost the soul. And I was actually told this. I had a revelation of that, something that was given to me. I won't sidetrack into it, but I was directly told that this is, and I was told by 2 different sources, who independent, that this is what happened to her. It was like the soul got severely fractured, and she didn't have full consciousness anymore. She's not even fully in her body anymore. It's like the consciousness is coming and going. So she's like part-time empty, most of the time empty, actually. And by the end, it was all the time empty. But when, as a young child, it was like part-time. And then as she got older, it just increasingly more and more empty. It's like a flickering light bulb that's just going on and off as it's dying. And so what happens is they're severely fractured mentally, emotionally, spiritually, on a soul level. I think if anyone who's researched soul fragmentation, you can have attachments, but you can also lose part of yourself. So you can gain other stuff stuck to you, but you can lose parts of yourself. I think she lost on a soul level parts of herself through this trauma, as well as mental fracturing, emotional damage. And then that leaves you kind of, plus the drugs and alcohol together, putting holes apparently in your aura or your etheric body. And all of that kind of leaves you open to these neg entities that now can kind of come into this fractured person and start piloting and puppeting them, as I called it. That's the article title was The Hidden Puppet Masters, talking about these beings that start, weaseling their way into highly damaged people. So they have several things happening. Psychology is not wrong in terms of what they're saying about their diagnosis. Yes, there's definitely a psychological component, but there's also, and this is what they're missing, there's a spiritual component. There's the negs and stuff that are taking advantage of these highly fractured, damaged people. And usually they always seem to have, in my experience, because I've known a lot of these people that clearly have negs piloting them. They all had the severe childhood trauma and abuse, usually sexual abuse, severe physical abuse, coupled with the severe drugs and alcohol as a coping mechanism. And then all of it combined together was just a disaster. So now they're also got all these negs all over them that are controlling their behaviors, and they're acting possessed, and what clued me in about that is they're all saying and doing some of the same verbatim things, like the same exact tones of voices, the same facial expressions, behaviors, and it's just beyond coincidence. It's not just strictly psychology at that point. There is something else. And then that's when I came across Robert Bruce's material, where he even mentioned that a single neg or demon, he calls it both, can control hundreds of people at the same time. It can pilot multiple people, and it can copy itself, replicates itself, and spreads itself out into the population. And all of it just came together for me, like ding, 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 like a big light bulb going off, and that's why I wrote the article. So in the article, I quote Robert Bruce talking specifically about the, negs inhabiting multiple people and possessing entire groups of people all at the same time to get them to do the same things. And I put it together with what I had kind of concluded based on Christine Lawson's book. And so that's what I think is happening. And then that can then lead to what we see in terms of spiritless people sometimes too. I think there's sometimes people who are just maybe, and I hate to say it, born spiritless. Maybe there's only so many souls that want to incarnate here. I don't know. Maybe there's just so many bodies and not enough spirits that want to come here. That there's just a lot of bodies that are functioning at its base physical brain stuff, but without a higher spiritual connection that helps override things and, gives you things like past lives and accumulated, incarnational knowledge. So why you can have little kids who are born really wise. They just seem to already know things. They're like 80-year-olds in a 3-year-old's body, and you can tell these kids have been around. This isn't their first rodeo. This is probably their 100th incarnation. But then you got the ones where they're just empty, and it's like they just don't have that higher spiritual pilot going on. So I do think we have that. And then you have it coupled with people who had a spirit, maybe my mom, who then just became severely fractured, and the light bulb that was just dying, and something else is jumping into the body. So kind of possessing them, it's opportunistic, looking for weak vessels, people who are fractured and vulnerable, especially with the drugs and the alcohol. It really kind of helps pull things in. And I know we're going to touch on that later towards the end as well, because we both know about that. But that's what I would say, that whole the NPC non-playable character, for those who don't know, it's a funny meme that has come into popular usage maybe in the last couple of years. And I really like it. I think it's funny. It refers to video games where you have the background characters that are being operated by the computer. Yeah, that it's not a person that's controlling it. It's just there is either just to serve as a background filler, or to be an actual antagonist against the person who's playing the game. You got to have an antagonist. And this whole reality, this whole place that we're in, it isn't just a Loosh farm, and it is a spiritual playground. I mean, it serves good and bad purposes. So it is kind of like a game, spiritual learning lessons. And, you got to have antagonists in the game to bounce yourself off of, to give you those negative experiences that test you and teach you. And hopefully, you make it out on the other side a better person. You transcend it instead of succumbing to it. That's why one of my favorite movie quotes is from The Shawshank Redemption. It's that quote where it's Andy Dufresne who crawled through a river of shit and came out clean on the other side. I love that quote because it has a metaphorical meaning for our reality. And it's something that we should be aiming for. You said, Dr. Randall, you mentioned that, I've had these negative experiences, but I've learned from them and I'm using them to help teach and empower others. And you're right in that all of them made me who I am. I even recently said that in my latest article. Well, one of my latest articles called INFJ. And I concluded that, I have to admit that, if every negative thing that ever happened to me is what made me me. So in a lot of ways, I can't, if I had to go back and do it again, I couldn't, it's crazy to say that, it's a weird conundrum. I created suffering at the time, but if you can make it through on the other side, you can look back and be like, that made me a better person. And now I don't think I would trade it for anything. So,
Well,
you see what happens is that you made a decision. Your intention was clear, and you didn't want to go down that road. And look at you now, okay? And you could have decided otherwise. You could have said, "Ah, screw it," okay? I'm mean. I'm a piece of shit. Blah blah. I'm like my mother.
but that's where higher spirit comes in. That's where I believe. You just have this inherent idea of right versus wrong, and you do have an inherent connection to something that people would say is God. The God, the creator spark, something good, the divine. And you feel an instinct to want to reach for that, no matter how all this negative stuff that's coming at you, it's wrong and bad, and you don't want to become that. No, that's gross. Like, why would I want to become the gross people who abuse me? They're gross. I don't want to be that, and if you're spirited, you should have that connection to that higher divine spark that you just feel a pull to. Hopefully. And I feel a lot of the people who succumb and just become as nasty as their abusers and bullies, if not even worse, maybe they're spiritless. And so they don't have that inherent connection to the higher goodness that, pulls them in that direction and makes them feel that, that's wrong.
No, with what you know now, if you went back as your mother's counselor or teacher, could you have brought her out of this? Because it seems like she was spirited, and then became less so as she got older with raising you and your brother. Can you go back there, and from what you know now, could you have guided her to that life? Because she's
I don't think so, because I realized in retrospect, after I read that Borderline Mother book, one of the things that Christine Lawson mentions, which I realized is very true, is the huge PTSD component of borderline. My mom it was beyond just psychological trauma. I believe she actually had cognitive impairment. She had something wrong with her brain, like physically wrong. And it could have been from the drugs and alcohol. It could have been from the severe trauma and abuse. Me alone, the short answer is no. Me alone could not have guided her through it. She was too far gone, and she needed, the way I've described it, and I don't even think this would work, long-term inpatient psychiatric treatment. She needed like intensive long-term inpatient treatment for her level of problems, because it wasn't just behavioral. There was a cognitive component, a PTSD component, and actual, I believe, true brain injury. So it was beyond any of my capability. I wouldn't have been able to guide her through that. No. So.
I took a couple of notes while you guys were talking, because everything you're saying, I have a personal experience with when it comes to the spiritual stuff. So one of the things you were talking about when it comes to people that haven't been through an awakening, or how it is to have gone through that enlightenment post, you have a post-enlightenment and a pre-enlightenment period. One of the things that was distinct with my awakening was prior to the age of 35, before it all began to kick off. And it actually had started at 35. It brought me to 35. It started when my best friend died, and then I started to have supernatural experiences with him. And that's what really started it. So, but I was in a trance-like state, distinctly. And the reason why I say distinctly is because after I went through everything that I went through, and as this started to crescent like this, it was, I was in a state, and Rochelle was too, of like near euphoria. And that went on for months and months. And we were just everything was euphoric. We were so excited. Oh my God, and the way that I could think distinctly changed. And I had one time explained it to Rochelle as almost like post-awakening. It's like my brain split into 3 separate analytical pieces, where each one has an ability to analyze the other. So a piece of information will come in, and I'm almost able to, and I'm not saying this in terms of an intelligence. I'm saying this in terms of something happened, and like something big happened, and it changed the way that I was able to think and process information, on top of, the experiences and learning about changing your perception. I was able to do all this. Suddenly, instantly, I could, and that connection that you're talking about, a connection to a greater power is absolutely true. And it was absolutely true from my experience. So, and I also wanted to say, Dr. Randall had touched on this subject a little bit, about how this what is inherent in the system here as the Loosh farm and the negative forces and this and it instigating negative reality for us, a synchronistic one, this and that, is that one of the reasons it is so beneficial to us on a spiritual level is because, yes, they do make us learn. They make us learn a shitload. They make us learn fast. They make us learn quick. They make us learn. And the more you become aware of negative forces and what's going on here, man, it's like you just start learning exponential growth, exponential spiritual growth, because you're able to just like what I mean. I've gotten to a point now where it's my days are no fear. Anything happens around me, I don't react. You know, it's like it doesn't matter how it is. Now, I did go through some extreme experiences to get to this point when it was my lung situation, and then almost, which was a very interesting experience given our conversation on negative forces, is there was an actual effort to try to take me out when I was laying on the table there. And like I told you about a nurse who came in when I was, everything inside my chest, like I don't know what had happened, it ripped open. I was bleeding out in my chest cavity. And the nurses were just kind of completely ignoring that fact. And I was in severe pain. They wouldn't give me pain medicine. And then one nurse who I'd never seen before and never saw since came in and gave me a blood thinner. Like, why would they give me a blood thinner if all this is going on? I'm screaming out in pain and everything like that, because she came in and told me what she was going to do. And I was just like, you know, whatever. It hurts so bad. I don't, maybe it'll help. What, you know, I wasn't thinking. And that night I was bleeding out all night. And it was Rochelle was keeping track of my vitals. And by the time the surgeon came in the morning, I'm completely out of it, having from blood loss, and it was bleeding out through my chest tube. And everything went crazy because he was like, holy crap, he's literally bleeding to death right now. And I went into an emergency third surgery. After I came out of that, I felt completely different. I didn't feel human. And that's, you know, a lot of this stuff were various stages into my awakening. I apologize for going on about that. I don't mean to make this a show about my own, but about myself. But one of the things, another thing I want to go back a little bit, a very important point to make in relation to that, and it learning and this place offering itself as a place for us to learn spiritually. Reincarnation and the understanding of that is a very important part to understanding that, you know, because other people would be like, what's the point? You're like, okay, great, I learn all this stuff and then I die and I'm no more. But no, you're not. You know, so it understanding that reincarnation is real is paramount to understanding why this place would be the way it is, and why you can learn from it so successfully and experience exponential growth, like you said, or go down the tubes the other direction, which has happened. One of the things that, and I didn't know anything about until reincarnation, until Rochelle and I had a situation where we were just standing in our living room, and she was on the opposite side from me, and, you know, we're just kind of walking around, and suddenly we're both stopped and we're both seized up. And we're both seized up looking at each other. Plain expression. And then suddenly her face shape starts changing rapidly. And I start getting all of these visions, experiences, past lives together. And then it stops. And then I'm let go of. And I'm looking at her like, oh my God, what just happened? And she's looking at me like, oh my God, what just happened? But I didn't know it happened to her too. And she's the first one. She goes, your face just changed a bunch of times. And I was like, your face just changed. So it happened to us both at the same time. So we, you know, and that was very important to what I was about to learn. That was around 2013. That was before, you know, so we were going through these supernatural experiences. Okay, so we covered a lot of ground and what are the ways in which negative forces attack us. They come through NPCs. People like your mother, who you had said had very fragmented spirit.
Yeah, and I realized I didn't really expand on that enough. I kind of sidetracked onto the whole borderline thing and the psychology versus spiritual, which I think there's both happening in a lot of people that are damaged. But the NPCs, like working through people, this is, again, something I've written about on my website, and I feel it explains so much of various phenomena we're seeing, you know, in our world. But it's like a major missing piece of the puzzle for many people. And it's just the idea that these forces, you know, are somehow extending themselves out into the population. Whether someone has no spirit at all, I'm willing to even entertain the idea we are in some sort of an AI fake reality where some people may not even be real at all. I'm not sure. They're literally like a background NPC, or it's just a fractured real person, or I don't know, or it is a real person who has no spirit. but these things are just kind of extending out into the population and speaking through and using these people as vectors of attack. Mm-hmm. So, on my recent article about, the conspiracies in the workplace, it's a microcosm of the greater world matrix. It touches on that a big, way where you can have some coworkers and bosses have got these negative things speaking through them or operating through them, but it can be your loved ones, like, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, family members, strangers out in public, kind of getting taken over, and stuff is using them. And it can create a lot of different phenomenon. Like, I talk about gang stalking and targeted individuals on my website. And I've talked about how I think a lot of people who believe themselves to be targets of gang stalking, if they're not aware of this component of reality, they're missing most of the piece of the puzzle, and they're trying to explain everything that's happening to them through a limited lens of just strictly physical based gang stalking. Like, these people are real people, but operating as themselves, but they're almost like superhuman. They're always able to read your mind and say things that match up to your thoughts, and behave in a synchronistic manner that lines up with your actions and movements, and be, preemptively put themselves in place at some place that you're going that they shouldn't have any way of knowing, and then say these street theater types of comments to you, and, to let you know that you're being monitored, all this stuff. It goes on and on, like, or even like be preemptively hired at any job that you could go work at to kind of be in place, to be that harassing boss or coworker that, drives you out the door and makes your life miserable. But I'm like, it just doesn't make logical sense, and it doesn't fit that this superhuman group of people is operating worldwide and can hone on anybody on the drop of a dime to do all these superhuman types of things. What makes more sense, I mean, I'm not saying there is no physical gang stalking. I know there is. I actually do believe in that. But a large component of it, I think, is a hyperdimensional component of these things that operate through people, speaking through people, manipulating their actions, and getting them to do and say things that align with a target. And sometimes the target's own lowered frequency then is pulling these things in. It's a frequency match, creating more of it, creates like a feedback loop, as I've explained it. So that, to me, I just wanted to elaborate on the whole NPCs and stuff operating through people, that I think it's happening all over the planet, every aspect of our society, and pretty much everybody, I think, listening to this has probably experienced it, even if they don't know that they have. You've had stuff pulled through people around you, and that goes for positive stuff too. I do need to put that out there. It isn't just all negative all the time. We have high positive forces at work in this reality, and it's doing the same stuff. It's like a tug of war. And they're also operating through people. So we've all had experiences with that as well, where we have extreme positive stuff that's speaking to us through other people, or operating through other people, or even domestic pets, as I've described it. So we got both positive and negative going on, utilizing any way in to help or hurt us. Because again, it's like a big tug of war. So I wanted to put that out there.
Awesome. And we also had talked about earlier when it comes to like the night crawlers and how they come at us when we're in a vulnerable sleep state. Other things that I've experienced is, and leading up to the show, I had touched about it on it. I was like, I feel defeated, I feel deflated. Mm-hmm. And, there was a direct reference to, and I kind of had a feeling, and there were some other little things, not as much as I thought, given a show on negative forces. So, and then of course what happened today with the weird sneeze, like that was just, it was really weird. And so also, another thing that they do, I know also they, with technology, and they, at least in my experience, I've seen where circumstances and situations will happen and occur synchronistic to pull someone further down, boom, 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 down the frequency chain. I've seen it happen to Rochelle where this will happen to her. And then suddenly my mom or something will like suddenly make a comment about, maybe our daughter, and like that might irritate my wife, and then suddenly the next thing there's another comment, and then there's this, and then that happens, and I've watched it, and I know what's going on when it's happening, and I that's normally when I start to tell her, I'm like, there's some some form of negative interference going on right now, and that's normally when we start to walk back away out of it, and it does work, and coaching and talking each other through it really does help, because what you're doing is you're just bringing awareness to it, like mm-hmm. we've talked about. And when you bring awareness to it, it's kind of like you're ruining their game totally. Let me see on the other. Oh wait. Okay, so we have gotten through that one. Right?
Yeah, a lot of people play into stuff without realizing it. And I'm not trying to act holier than thou. I've done it.
Used,
I'm sure. Yeah, everybody can get used. Even the ones with awareness, you can just, if you're not staying on top of things, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not to try to act like we're better than this. No, we've definitely.
Oh, no. Yeah, I hope I didn't give that
yeah.
impression, because she helps me just as equally as I help her. And,
oh, yeah.
And
so,
yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, no, you
Oh, no, it's okay. I was just thinking it is true, because there, like the time that I did get marked by a demon, I did want to bring that up again. I didn't just get marked. I was dumb. I drank I usually have a limit. And one of the reasons I have a limit is because of negative forces, because it's kind of stupid to have that level of awareness and then just drink yourself to an oblivion, not thinking that they're going to exploit that. No, one time when I did let it go too far, that was when that demon completely. And she said that, and I was blacking out from the interference, the demonic interference, because I didn't recall a lot of the things. She was telling me, she was like, you were saying just the most craziest, nastiest things, and making these nasty comments, not directly towards her, just completely off. And then I had that vision that morning when I was waking up, and I knew it was messing up with me. And I actually looked up what might be a purple demon in demonology. And the description of this demon and everything had matched my behavioral patterns that night. And when I told her this and I read it out to her, she was like, oh my God, like that is totally real. And it was very real. That changed me so much, because that made me really realize, holy crap, these guys they're watching me. And I've known this since some of the supernatural stuff had happened to me, like getting the text back on the computer and stuff like that, advising me what I needed to do. But that was a positive advice, but I knew then that I was being watched by things that I couldn't see. And I also know, because of all the negative forces attacks, that I'm being watched by them too. Like they're almost at the gate. They're just sitting there waiting. And this one was waiting for that moment, and boom, it got it. It got what it wanted, and it marked me. But I jokingly say after a week, whenever the positive visualization came in, I marked it back. So, but I tagged it back. And I tagged it back.
When it marks you, then that's so interesting. So it's just basically like, it's almost like claiming you for it, and that it's now gonna, like, you belong to it, and it's just gonna do stuff to you now.
I think
forever.
It was an infection of my electromagnetic field, a full blown, maybe a copy of itself, a fractal component of it, of like, how we were saying that can control multiple people at once. When it happened and I had that tattoo described and I heard the voice marked, I actually heard it said by 3 separate voices saying marked, whispering marked, and then I heard it marked again. And I woke up and everything seemed gray and irritation, constant irritation. And every day that week, and I was like, oh God, this is so real. I was thinking to myself, and I was like, I want to feel like I used to feel. I could feel lower frequency distinctly, because I was constantly irritated. I wasn't myself. I was running negative feedback loops in my mind. I was engaging in negative feedback loops externally in my experience, and unable to pull myself out of it. And like I said, that's when I really, at the week of it, and I started talking, I was really starting to get scared, because I was like, this thing is real. It's really done something to me. And that morning I woke up, and all of a sudden a positive imagery and positive music was started to play in my mind. And I suddenly started to feel like, that how you'll feel like a surge of energy go up your back. I started to feel coming up my back in waves and cascading waves. And then I started to see a vision of that pattern that it marked on my back, literally burning off. And then I felt like myself again. And this was a real experience. And I don't, I'm not sure, I haven't really gone out there and said, does anybody else have experience being marked or looked it up or anything like that? But I know it was real, and I know it was real per my experience, and maybe just communicating this. If anybody that is listening has had a similar experience, I would definitely love to hear about it, because the craziest part was how I was behaving, what I was saying, and the subjects I was talking about were completely like really off, like Rochelle had said. And then whenever I looked up that color, that distinct color purple, and looked up something about a purple demon, started to read about a specific demon, everything that I was reading was exactly like the behaviors I was exhibiting. So all this stuff comes from somewhere, and it's, a lot of it is based off of, truth as it is per each person's experience. Okay. before I keep going on about that.
Oh, I was going to say also, I was just going to add really quick, the issues I feel like that happened with my dad, it wasn't just that, oh, he was military intelligence for 4 years and that was a single-handed problem of his entire life and anything that trickled down to me. There's so much I didn't get into at the beginning because I wouldn't even know where to begin. It's so complicated. But one of the major things that I came to figure out, again, only as an adult, was he, in my opinion, I'm 150% positive that he's got a demonic, major, big demonic attachment. It's like scary, the level of his demonic attachment. And I don't know where or when or how he would have picked it up. I know he wasn't consciously involved in occult stuff. It's not that. So it wasn't any like, oh, he's a Satanist and, did some kind of black mass ritual. No, it wasn't anything like that. But I do know he did say, he drank a lot and did, smoked a lot of weed and stuff when he was like a teenager and into the military and stuff. Maybe that brought something in. But I also have theorized that whatever he was involved with in the military, and this may be like sound weird or far-fetched to people who haven't researched it, maybe they did something to him during his time because I think a lot of our the military stuff is involved in some very high negative stuff, satanic. It isn't good. It isn't all what people think it is. So there's that possibility, like while he was in the military, maybe they did something to him and kind of attached something to him. I don't know, or he drew it in himself, but he's definitely got like a demonic component. So basically I was dealing with a father who basically almost in a lot of ways acted either a combination of narcissistic and almost like he was Asperger's, like lacking empathy and understanding of human emotions and motivations and a complete inability to see other people's viewpoints. And I don't mean to disparage Asperger's, but or even autism spectrum, but it was kind of like a combination of that, but also demonic. And so the hate, it's so scary. Like the stuff that could come out of this guy's mouth and how it's just, and then there was just, this is scary, but like he was once telling me like anybody who ever crossed him in life, who tried to truly hurt him, all wound up dead and like right away after whatever happened. And they died prematurely and very violently. So he had like a whole list. I nickname it, the Bob, insert his real last name, hit list. And it's just like, this list of people that tried to screw him over in life and every one of them's dead, violent deaths, like decapitation, destroyed in a car accident, eaten by a shark attack. I mean, just weird, really high level, violent, dark and bizarre types of deaths. And I came to learn in my research of paranormal and demon stuff that when a demon is put on a person, it almost becomes a mutual beneficial thing where you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. So if they are attached to you and feel like that you guys have a mutual understanding, anybody that tries to hurt you, the demon will take care of that, so to speak. So they'll,
that's really, that's really fascinating. And after
it's scary. It's like why I try to just, he's not in my life anymore. And I would not want to engage with him or piss him off because I can't say that some of the psychic attacks and stuff that have happened to me aren't from him. I think they are because I know the level of hate and rage that he's demonstrated towards me. So, so it's very confusing being someone who I believe, incarnated here with a positive mission, being born to someone who's like the devil basically. And, and once I became a teenager and into my 20s, it was just a lot of hostility and very dark and hatred. So I feel like some of the psychic attacks I've experienced, things may have come from him. And just that intense level of hatred and whatever is attached to him, operating through him, was attacking me as well. So I think that's actually sad to say. One of the sources is my own dad, in my opinion, based on what I know of him and his life and the things that he's been involved in and his behaviors. So.
Yeah, that's really interesting what you say about that. You scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. Because when I was in, I could totally say, and I'll give you more information about this in an email after this, because there are certain demons that are obsessed with certain human life activities, including drugs, using a sexual activity, both dark and pretty much dark when it comes to demonic activities, aggressive sexual activities, those just level all along that dark level of things, the dark side of humanity, I guess you would say. And for those who carry out those kind of, you know, that's the you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back kind of thing. And
yeah,
totally,
and
I
it's
can see that.
it's some kind of an agreement I read that, you know, but and the fact that his seems to be operating like that is actually quite telling. It says to me, this is above and beyond just a normal situation of somebody attracting in an egg. Usually when you attract in an egg, maybe at best they're hitchhiking, maybe they're feeding, I don't know, but this seems to be, if this thing is killing for him, which I know this sounds crazy. I can't even believe I'm saying this. It's like, it just sounds like, wow. But there's no doubt he's got a whole list of people who've died mysterious, violent deaths right after they coincidentally went after him in life, tried to screw him over or hurt him in some way, and they're all dead. So if that's what's going on, that's above and beyond just attracting in. So I've had to look at that and be like, okay, this is almost like something was put in him or on him in a ritual. It's almost like an agreement. And that's where I was there. I know he's not consciously involved in anything occult, but was it something in the military? But considering what they're involved with, and I know they were experimenting on him, and he, you know, had weird things going on to him in the military that I won't sidetrack into, but I do talk about it in my book though. So that just says to me, you know, it's something bigger than the usual is happening here. And that's a component of what's happened to me in my upbringing. That's what my father is, you know, somebody who's got that monkey on his back, you know.
It's a big one, and it's true. And you know, you were saying, I hope you don't think this sounds weird or anything. There literally isn't anything you could say to me that I would ever think is weird because of my experiences, just like with you. And I remember talking to Tom one time, and at the beginning, when I first started emailing him, I was really insecure. And I was like, I hope you don't think this is weird. He's like, it's weird, seriously? He's like, you know, the world is, you know, we're kind of normal. It's just this reality is weird. You know, it's the one that's off, you know? Okay, so that was really, I appreciate you bringing up that story. I don't see anything unusual about it. It's, there's very certain circumstances that we've gone through in this experience to get us to where we are, just like we were bringing up earlier. So, you know, one of the things I do want to talk about, a big one, identifying incoming attacks. Now, a lot of people are not aware of synchronistic, the rules of engagement, let's just say. Rules of engagement, things like them having to, in some way or another, notify you in a synchronistic way, perhaps putting a number in your environment, like what happens to me all the time, some sort of indication that they're going to attack. And if you're unaware of once again, we go back to awareness, and awareness being the key to defeating and overcoming these things. Because if you are aware when you see this in your environment, you're going to go, oh, okay, something's pecking at the gate right now. It's coming in. And you can prepare yourself, you know? So for me, it's, and also for you, and, you know, I was the one who was led to your stuff on ear tones, supernaturally, we'll say, whenever your articles would be returned to in my searches. One of those was the ear tone article. And that to me is always the funny thing about us is, and we both brought this up. You brought this up a little bit after I brought it up to you months ago, where I was like, I hadn't heard ear tones in so long. And then literally when I thought that, I was emailing you that, I believe I emailed you that. It was something like this. And then the next day, literally I had this like full blown, massive raging left ear ringing. And then, of course, I went back to your article to read all about it and to refresh my memory on it. And ever since then, it's been put to use again. We both get ear tones, left and right, and I have followed your research on it, where we've got the right side, which represents a positive polarity, and the left side, which represents a negative polarity. Also, the thing is the number sightings, which we both bring, or what you brought up in this right here, where I see, and I've written articles about this before, and I've documented this. I think I showed you and Tom, oh, my phone's off, my collection that I've been building of all the times I'll see the 666 on license plate start coming in all around me, and then the next thing I know, an attack starts to happen. So we see things like that, other synchronicities, ways in which feeling something negative, feeling the polarity of the room drop, or not polarity, the frequency of the room drop, which is palpable. You can feel that. It always to me feels kind of like I feel it maybe in my stomach area, and I could also feel it in the environment at the same time happening. Okay, so let's talk about your experience of the ways with pets and other ways in which other things in which you talked about in these items.
Oh, well, what I also want to add is something I didn't even think, I forgot and to put in the notes was, and it's important, I call it the occult warnings. And I touched on this in some places in my website, but I've come to learn through experience, seeing this actually happen, where if a negative force is about to breach your realm in like an actual free will violating way, it's not something that is part of your karmic learning lesson. It's just truly a straight up free will violation. They just want to go after you, but it's not fully allowed. And I'm not the only one who's noticed this or has talked about this, but I've come to figure it out on my own, and it's valid, is the idea of getting an occult warning, where the person who has these negative things operating through them, they will say, it's almost like warning you, giving you a heads up of who and what they really are. Like they'll let you know, they'll say strange things that kind of indicate that, of who they really are. And it's up to you to recognize what they're saying. And they never say it just once. They'll say it at least 3 times. So it's that whole number 3 thing, which comes up a lot with paranormal and occult stuff. Like, there it is, that's one way in which it manifests, but like say 3 times and, different circumstances to kind of hammer it home to let you know, say this weird pointed thing, bringing attention to something about themselves. It's like letting you know. I've experienced this like with my brother, who was, oh my God, he wasn't even like a person anymore. He was like a demon infest portal vector of some sort. It's above and beyond what most people would ever experience, but I've experienced it on a more milder level with other people out in the world, just kind of giving me these warnings. Like one guy who ended up being, he was like an acquaintance friend, part-time roommate in this house I used to like be a roommate in, and he made a very pointed reference one time that multiple people have come up to him and told him that he doesn't have an aura, that everybody else around him will have one, but except for him. And he said it to me with that telltale, I realized in retrospect, that telltale glint in the eye and predatorial smirk, just staring me down with that funny smirk and then that glint as he's letting me know this about him, just kind of out of nowhere to let me know, I don't have an aura, and it's like, and this guy would wind up trying to attack me twice, and I had to kick him out of my life, as a friend for that reason, because he was proving himself to be dangerous. But he had a very abusive childhood, drank a lot and stuff. So he was that textbook template of who becomes infected by negs. And I don't even think he was a full person anymore. He had very dead eyes and, giving me that warning about what he really is. And so anyway, that's something I've noticed, is that occult warning stuff speaking to you, letting you know, very revelatory types of things. And it's up to you to recognize it. And like I said, I'll do it more than once usually. And then if you don't recognize and you can allow them into your life anyway, then that's like, it's like a breach of your realm, and it's like giving them permission. So now you're allowing them in. And then once they kind of breach your realm, what I noticed is then they can just continue to breach it more and more and more. So usually the stuff the attacks and the realm breaching, it doesn't go from 0 to 100 overnight. It tends to be a step-by-step. It's weeding its way, and as long as you keep not saying no, and then you're giving it permission to get worse and worse in your life. And I feel like sometimes these are situations that could wind up in your death if you're not careful. In my brother's case, he almost got me killed on 3 different occasions. And I, right at the very beginning, when I brought him back to California to try to help him and have him move in with me, he let me know straight out the gate what he was. And he said it multiple times. And I was naive and I didn't understand and I didn't want to hear it. So I flat out rejected what he was telling me. But he point blank told me.
Oh God, yeah, the warning signs. Like that's the problem with being naive. Just like with the guy I had. Now, the more that I think about it, that guy that I've told you about that moved into my house and was taking advantage of us. And there were so many glaring red siren warning signs. Like, and Rochelle and I are like, hey, you should read this article by Tom Montauk. It's awesome. Hey, we're like trying to awaken him, trying to enlighten him, and we're completely in our own world. And it's like this guy's literally like, oh, I'm about to completely upend your world, and I'm
about to wreck you. You have no idea.
You have no idea. So I understand that completely.
It's not just like, so to clarify for listeners, it's not just red flag behaviors. It's actual point blank warnings, like them point blank telling you what they are in some sort of way. And it's up to you for whether or not you're understanding what you're hearing. So yeah, but other ways, you know, like you mentioned, the ear tones for sure. That's been a huge one whenever something's up in my reality. Usually involving being in contact with key people. So like if I'm in contact with you, there's been other key people that I've done interviews with and always experience the ear. So to me, it indicates monitoring. Something's kind of keeping an ear on the situation. Can also indicate, I think it does indicate like a timeline in flux. You know, there's timelines shifting directions. So something's just paying attention, monitoring you, and maybe for negative purposes because they want to interfere. So, and then the numbers, like you mentioned, I have my particular negative numbers. I never had numbers and I never knew about such things, but thanks to my brother, he's the one who introduced me. He had his number 141. And he was telling me about how, and then I was always following him everywhere in life. And then all of a sudden it's like I caught it like a virus just through sheer awareness and hearing about it and putting my awareness on. And then that was 2001 and it has never stopped. I've had it almost 20 years now. Whenever something negative is trying to come into my reality, breach my realm, interfere in any kind of way, put me on a bad path, I'll get the 141s and making themselves known in really sometimes over the top ways where it's not just you reading too much into something and it's not just a coincidence. So, the whole write-up I have on my website documents some of my more outstanding number citing things to show readers that, look, this is not just me imagining it. I'm not crazy. Like I've got photographic proof, So
no, it's just like me. It's like, it happens so much. And you just want to like collect all this and you want to write about it and you want to tell other people. And that was the driving force behind a lot of the stuff that I started to do on my blog was show people that this stuff is real. It's like, cause at first it was, and it started with the 666 being used as a number began after my first interview that Dr. Randall did for me on a Radio Pyramid One network. And I had been attacked, but I never was aware of blatant synchronicities. I've always seen the number 42 used as a synchronicity in my life since I was a teenager. I saw it repetitively. Before I understood anything about it, I would just be like, why am I seeing this number every time I look at a clock or look at a book or look here? I started taking pictures of that because it still happens to me. We bought my daughter, she likes Olaf from Frozen, and I bought her a cardboard cutout. And on the back of it, of Olaf, and on the back of it, in the middle of it, is the number 42. And I took a picture of that, and like it's everywhere. And okay, so then after this, I'm like, okay, I start seeing 666s, and I remember the day specifically, or I believe it was right after I talked to Jamie Clark, the psychic, and Dr. Randall, and I was talking to him, and I called in on that show. He was actually talking to you, Dr. Randall, and I called in on his show, and I was talking about unconditional love. And I wrote an article about this, and I guess it was a message that what I was saying that they don't really like. So after that, I got out of the show. I went to the grocery store, and I parked, and there was 4 6s on a license plate in front of my parking spot. And I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of creepy. I didn't really ever notice it before, but for some reason I noticed it now. And then I went to the grocery store, and then I left, and I pulled out, and right as I pulled out, a car drove by with another 4 6s on it. And I was like, okay, this is definitely something. And I knew about them giving signs. I just, at that time, it was never 666 specifically. So they picked one because at one time I had decided that I was going to make 666 represent something positive rather than walk around being ominous. I'm going to, and, but then I realized I was really giving up a good indicator because it's traditionally known as a negative number. And so I saw it there, then I saw it again, then I saw it again. I was like, oh crap, like this is completely new. I've never been hit this many times with that many 666s. And that one time I told you, I went up to the beach with my wife and my daughter, saw 8 of them. And and I'm talking, we'll pull up into an intersection, and a car from just across from us that's making a left turn will just come, and you'll completely see the number, and it'll be right there, like unmistakable, completely unmistakable. And some of them back to back. And it, I think that sometimes they throw that out there in an attempt to knock you off your let's say your frequency vibration maintenance. Because
I wondered that. Yeah, because you see it and you're like, oh no.
You freak out. And so that, and I started to notice that was happening like that. I would see it and I'd be like, ew, kind of like in my stomach. And I'd be like, okay, they're going to attack, and that opens up completely to them. And they're like, ha ha, yeah, So it's and I really fully believe that because of the way. And now that I see it all the time. I take pictures of it. I photograph it. I've had so many weird experiences with this. One time a car came, and I had told Tom about this experience. I was like on that day, and I was getting attacked constantly. And I was like, I didn't see a 666, and I thought to myself, it popped in my head, and said, I haven't seen a 666. I look in the rear view mirror, and there's this blue truck coming at my car. I'm talking like 100 miles an hour, and the thing. He comes around, and then he cuts over to the right, gets around some other cars, gets right in front of me, and then starts to slow down real fast because he comes to stop sign. And he's got 4 6s on the back of his truck. And I'm like, whoa, wow. Right? I'm like, right when I just thought,
that was like a shark that was just coming for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, wow, that's some real hardcore they know what's going on. They're listening. And like I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about it. I'm saying Rochelle, I'm talking to her about it. I was like, I was just thinking about it. And this guy just came out of nowhere. And then she's like, take a picture. And I'm like, yeah. So I grab my phone to take a picture of the light turned green. The guy punches it. I'm talking just punches it. And I can't get a picture of it. So I was frustrated about that, but there was just too many things going on in that whole rollout to be coincidence.
And then that is a whole side subject where it's like a can of worms right there. When that level of on the spot manipulation happens, where something's just almost like out of nowhere in your reality, fulfilling something, that's where, and I've said this multiple times on my site, you start to really question, how real is this place? Because there are some things happening that you're like, are we really in the Matrix? Is it really like that? Because me and you, we have some experiences where it's just like, that cannot even... It's just, it's like it just got inserted, dropped into the timeline, and how is that possible? And it could be higher dimensional. Game master. So it's like some sort of higher dimensional manipulation of the timeline, or this is some sort of. I don't think it's fully fake. I still won't fully adhere to that belief, but there's a large component of this place that feels largely fake. So
glitches like we both experienced many reality glitches.
Oh yeah.
I've had so much stuff happening. Like I've how many couples, and I saw another guy on YouTube the other day that said he had seen the same kind of phenomenon happen to him. Rochelle and I this was during the process we're going through our awakening, and we both look up into the sky and we both see in perfect formation the symbol for the eye of Ra drawn by clouds. And this in detail, the exact shape, the part underneath the eye, all of it. Yeah. And we're both like, I don't know why we didn't think to take a picture of it. We were just mind blown. At the same time, we were a little unnerved because it was so real and it was there, and we were both seeing it. And I was like, it's like it's looking at us, and that alone was unnerving.
Yeah, I had that too. I was on the beach in Fort Lauderdale, and I had almost like a voice in the head, basically, and it sounded friendly and giddy and excited. And I talk about this in my book. It wanted me to look for shapes in the clouds, and I was like, I'm like arguing with this voice because it seamlessly melds with your own. It's, and it might have been some kind of what they call the microwave hearing thing, where they beam stuff like the Frey effect or whatever it's called. But yeah, and so I was kind of arguing with this, like, I don't want to look for shapes, and that's not something I would do. It's kind of one of those whimsical things, and I'm not like that. And it was like, encouraging me, no, do it, and it wanted me to see, and I look up, and there was a perfect gray alien face in the clouds, and the eyes were where the cloud was cut out, so it was the blue sky forming the perfect big almond eyes. It was the teardrop head, the tiny little mouth. I mean, it was a perfect, and it connected to the cloud. And this thing was just so giddy and happy. Like, it was so proud of its handiwork. So I'm like, what is happening here?
You see, and it's crazy. It's just, and then they try to tell that to people. That's why I said I'm so glad Rochelle experienced all these things for it, because I would be sitting in a room somewhere. Yeah, like, all right, let me get back on before we...
when you mentioned domestic pets, like domestic pets being an indicator, I used to have a cat, Kitty, and definitely when things were around, and I know other people with pets, dogs, cats, anything, certain animals are really sensitive. Horses are sensitive to these, forces. They'll start getting agitated, and, if negative things are around, whether it's aliens, these negative Archon demon things that are like lurking around, paranormal stuff, look to your pets, because they're very, very sensitive, and they'll clue you in. And I have a lot of stories about that, but I know we're running short on time, but just want to put that out there. Definitely pets are a good indicator. Trust what they're doing in terms of their behavior. They can see and hear and sense things beyond human capabilities. So, always look to your pets.
Oh yeah, and I think that goes back into history too. A lot of people know that. Time-wise, we don't have any limits. I don't know if Dr. Randall does or not. Dr. Randall,
I'm a student here. I'm listening to you guys and taking it all in. So hey.
So yeah, so long as you're okay with time, we could keep going. Because this is actually really good information. And this is one of the reasons, and this, I'm thoroughly enjoying this because this is literally our life. Like this is the way our reality is now. And I remember somewhere I was led to a movie synchronistically after I awakened, and one of the things they said in the movie, and it was kind of like a really bad B movie, but it was all about awakening, right? And the person was in the movie, they say, once you awaken, you can't go back. And it's so true. Because, there were times when I was like, God, I just want to go back to when I didn't know anything. And, I was just
you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
Yeah. When I was a software engineer and I was just programming and going to work and all that stuff. And and this is, one of what they do when they attack in multiple ways. And I've been attacked in all sorts of different ways. One of the ones you've been talking about, how they've messed with my work. They've messed with my, especially when right before the process started off, I guess they had known what was going in. My everything went crazy at my job, and I ended up leaving it and starting my own company. But because it was part of it was my fault. My mind was being messed with. I was being led to doing things that were going to cause chaos. But it was right after my surgeries and right before my awakening started to happen. So I was in this. And I was really in bad shape mentally after my surgeries. I had PTSD. The world felt like it was just empty, and I was being heavily manipulated, and everything was boom, 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 boom. And I had to start to survive. I had to start my own business and everything like that. And then that was a little bit different. But then eventually I started to get really disinterested with the way that software engineering was going, but that's a completely different story. So when we talk about mitigating negative forces attacks, this is really important because one of the last things anybody in the world needs to be left with in this conversation is feeling that they're just victims to it, because that's exactly what Archons, demonic entities, that's what they want. They want to put you in a victim into a victimhood. They want to keep you there, and they want to manipulate you. And the ones that do it for Loosh, they want to perpetuate this. And they don't want to give up a good game, especially if you're a very easily manipulative person to manipulate and give good Loosh. You give good feedback to them. You're a source of energy, and that will not go unnoticed. So our personal frequency is involved in this, and one of the reasons is increasing our frequencies. But that's not so easy for some people. And I was having a conversation with my friend James the other day, who he told me he admired me for how I was able to control my perception. And how I was always able to maintain a positive attitude no matter what was going on around me. He's like, with him, like the perceptual, habitual negative thinking, where you visualize a trench. Each time you dig it, you think a negative thought, you dig the trench, you think more negative thoughts, you're digging it deeper and deeper and deeper until that trench becomes your home, literally, and it becomes your comfort zone. And Tom says this on his opening page, where your misery gives you identity. And that happens to some people. And in order to get out of that metaphorical trench, they have to start filling the trench up to come back to the surface. And it's, that's a process. That's not something that you just wake up overnight and you're like, I'm going to be a positive thinker. And, I try to coach my friend, I try to encourage him, and I try to help him. So when we're talking, a lot of people that will be manipulated by these things are in that kind of condition. And I think this is a really important reason I'm bringing it up first. Because there's, we can talk about laying on of hands and things like that, which do work 100%. But there has to be another person involved who's aware of that and is in a positive position. And the other person has to be aware that will work and everything like that. So there has to be a bunch of factors. So where do we go with somebody who's in a habitual negative thinking kind of mentality to where they are aware of Archons and they are aware that they're being puppeted? How do we get them from there to raising their personal frequency, things like that? Is that I don't mean to ask a really super complicated question or anything. I might have deviated a little bit, but and Dr. Randall, you might be able to touch on some of this stuff. Because
I'm not listening to Carissa.
Oh, okay. Well, what do you think? What do you think, Carissa? Sorry.
I don't know, because
I think we can build on this together. So
I actually have never been in that state. So it's hard for me, despite everything that ever happened in my life. It's weird. And I've tried to figure this out and analyze it myself. Why did I remain so optimistic? And I always had hope. I was truly never one of those people who saw the glass as half empty. And I would unconsciously say things like, the glass is half full without realizing what I'd said until I said it. And then realizing, oh, that's one of those tests to see how optimist or pessimist you are. So I've always somehow, for some reason, despite all the negative, and it doesn't mean it never ground me down or had negative effects on me. It did, but it never caused me to ever subscribe to that Murphy's Law view that you mentioned earlier. And I've met people who have that and they annoy me. I'm like, ugh, it's gross. I don't like that mentality. I've never had it. I've always been optimistic, always believed there was a light at the end of the tunnel, always felt like there's hope and I had a whole future out there. So no matter what bad things were happening as a teen into my early 20s, I just maintained this optimism. And I honestly, I feel like I can't answer for how would you get somebody who's in such a bad state. And I know that actually is pretty common. It's a real thing and it's very common. These people who have just become really deeply entrenched in pessimism and hopelessness. I don't know. I wouldn't actually know what to say to them because I for some reason, I never fell into that myself. And I feel like because I always maintained optimism and hope, that was a big part of why I could get out of it more easily maybe than other people.
That's interesting because I had definitive events in my, because I used to, I was a habitual negative thinker. I would be, and we could jump also to, alcohol and also discuss things like pharmaceutical addiction because I was addicted to Adderall. It was my performance enhancing drug for work. And I would take massive amounts of it, but it was also opening me up like a pinball machine for Archons. Literally, so bouncing me here, and combined with my habitual negative thinking, I was just a continual. And, I remember back then, whenever anybody would ever ask me how I felt or how I was doing, I would always say I'm tired, or just like the automatic response, tired, even though I was loaded on pharmaceuticals and drinking a lot of like Monsters and energy drinks and this like that. And this is like throughout my entire 20s and into my early 30s. And I was just always tired, even though I was on all that. But I would sleep every other day. I was a mess. It's a total mess. But huge things happened in my life. First, the number one was Rochelle and her immediate unconditional love for me, which opened up something inside of me. And that changed the way that I perceived myself, because obviously I used to think I was just a loony freak. I was a great programmer. Yeah, I would give myself that. But the worst thoughts would go through my mind from the time I would wake up to the time I would go to bed, even if that was after a whole cycle of being up all night and the next day, just constant bombardment and inner bombardment and negative thinking. I would always think it was going to happen, like something negative was going to happen the minute I wake up, and that would be my first thought. Like better to and I would convince myself better to think that way I won't be let down. It's a really shitty way to live, and I was miserable, and I was making everybody around me miserable as well. But it wasn't until, and I didn't have any self-love, so it wasn't until Rochelle and I met her, and I. To this day, she's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, and I tell her that all day long, every day. And I wear a shirt every day. It says, "I'm my awesome wife," and with many different styles, and there's a reason for it. No one in my life or anything I've ever seen on TV was express the amount of love that she has for me, and to this day. And that I would always thought, well, if she loves me that much, then there must be something valuable about me, because I think this is the hottest chick on the face of this planet, and she wants me, and she loves me, and so that. And then, of course, for perception management, my surgeries, getting at the age of 33 thrown on an operating table with tubes coming out of you because of a collapsed lung, and then having to have all these surgeries done because I had blebs all over my lungs. And they said they hadn't seen it in medical history since 1978 was the last case incident of that, where the person had like literally all over. Normally smokers have like one or two. I was a chain smoker, but should not have had them all over. Make a long story short, when you're on an operating table, you're at 33, your whole life just flat. You just met the woman of your dreams, and now you think she's going to have to take care of you because you're going to be, because you're a mess. And then that you can't survive thinking that way. So I had to learn to start thinking more positive. I had to, and it also benefited going through something extreme. Made it easier not to freak out about other things that are happening. I started to notice that people around me would freak out about things that really weren't all that big of a deal. Because at 33, when you're at the finish line of life, that, and a lot of people have NDEs will say this, and I did have an NDE at the second surgery. And so that changed me. That fundamentally changed me. But I know it's possible. You read, if someone were to be so open-minded as to read like through a Joseph Murphy book, for instance, you can put things patterned into yourself which should mitigate negative forces attacks. Affirmations. You just have to get over that hump where you've got that internal resistance when you want to say something, such as the famous Joseph Benner, God loves and cares for me and has given me all good things. I love God and nurture only the thoughts and actions that God wants for me. Even though that might not necessarily be in a mitigating negative forces attacking context, it is still a positive affirmation that can be used to raise your frequency. And it could, along with other positive affirmations and prayers and such like that. So getting someone there's even internal resistance to saying that because they don't believe it. And and I guess it's just something that one thing I've noticed is you can't do it for them. They have to get to a point to where they want to make that change. It has to come from their own effort. So sorry. I just, okay. I wanted to because I love my friend James, and he's an awesome friend, and I want to help him so bad. And sometimes like we were going back and forth in text the other days, and I was just kind of say, okay, well, one of the things you do is look forward to, to things. And I always think that's important. He does get what I know he's now coming into his awareness is attacked by negative forces because of a negative outlook and things like that, which opens holes. So mitigating it, what are the other ways in which work effectively to increasing our personal frequency and to be able to mitigate these attacks and the voices and all of that stuff that comes along with it?
Well, yeah, like I said, while I don't have I've never had the issue of being firmly entrenched in a general negative mindset or pessimism. I did go through a period of a lot of fear because of all the craziness that was kind of coming at me, all the paranormal and the abductions and all that weirdness. So I touched on earlier at the very beginning about that awareness of the fear frequency and how when that became known to me, there was a situation that happened. I laid down and wanted to meditate spur of the moment, was not even planned, just made it up on the spot. I'd like to try to see if I can connect to my higher self. I'd heard about that and I'm like, oh, let's try to do that. And I'd been trying to do it for 2 weeks leading up to that, but I decided again that night, spur of the moment, hey, let's try this again, So even though I hadn't made any progress, I just kept hammering away at it like every night or every other night over a 2-week period, for a little bit of time just to see. And usually I would just end up falling asleep and nothing would happen. But that particular night, something happened. It was like, it took 2 weeks, but I finally had a breakthrough and a connection happened. And I was connecting, and I even have an article on my site called The Higher Self. So if anyone wants a full story about this, it is there on my site. But so I'm having this connection with, it was clearly a positive source, and the voice of it sounded like me. And anytime I have afterwards connected with my higher self, I noticed it sounds like me, but just like older and more mature and wise. It's empathetic. So it's emotionally detached, but empathetic. Uh-huh. It has total empathy, but it doesn't get caught up in the negative emotions that, you might be feeling when you're speaking to it. And it's very calming and reassuring. It's very eternal. It's wise, but it sounded like my own voice, but like just a better version of me. Sure. And so I'm connecting to this thing. We're having a back and forth. And right at that moment, this car pulls up right outside the window at 2 a.m. This is 2 a.m. Just music is blaring, like the bass just thumping, like boom, 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 and everyone's getting out of the car, slamming doors and yelling and talking. And like they just come back from the club or something, and this had never happened. And all the time I'd lived there, never had a car like that pull up right outside my apartment and basically almost my spot, right out in front of my window and do this. And the timing of it was so ridiculous that I immediately knew, like, this is like interference. So I even asked my higher self when we're having this back and forth, and I could feel actually that the connection was starting to break between me and my higher self once this thing happened. So it's like I'm getting pulled apart from it. Like, and I'm like, oh, like, what kind of, you feel like you're reaching out. You don't want it to break apart. So I asked it, is this interference? And it said yes. And I'm like, from them? And it was yes. And then it elaborated, it's to keep you scared all the time. So this, it was explaining what had been, actually that was, I forgot sorry, I'm telling this all out of order. I think there was another question I asked after that for clarification, and it confirmed that, they're trying to keep you in a fear frequency. That's what it said, to keep you scared all the time. So it was letting me know that, because that's right. I think I was asking like about all the crazy paranormal and abduction stuff that had been erupting in my life for a while now. And then, I clarified that they're behind it to keep you scared all the time. So once that was told to me, that was it. It just, the fear evaporated overnight. Like, how can you keep being scared of something when you know it's a game?
What it is.
Like,
Yeah.
they're literally just toying with you. You can't take it seriously. Even the black helicopters hovering right over my apartment, trying to threaten, and pointing at my front door and pointing at my back door and, doing all this stuff and all the other things that were going, the crazy voicemails I was getting, just weird, random. I call it the fear and paranoia generators. It's like the circus, like a 3-ring circus of fear and paranoia generators. Like, it's just a joke. Like, all right, forget it. Like, even the neg entities that were coming around in the middle of the night, like doing their thing, trying to scare me. I just lost all fear of all of it, like overnight, from one night to the next. And that just shifted everything. So that was one way you can get a shift, like almost overnight, which is just awareness, like awareness and understanding of what is happening here. They're just messing with you. They're trying to feed. They're trying to distract. They're trying to derail you. They're just trying to keep you tap dancing over here, so you don't see what's happening over there or fulfill your life purpose or, do things that matter. So anyway, that's one way in which, I feel in my experience that I can talk about that I know works. Just awareness. Just be aware, and you can't take it seriously anymore. And so, after that, a couple times, a few more entities still tried to come around and do their little harassing and feeding thing. But I would just roll over like, I got to go to work tomorrow. I don't have time for you. Like, go away. And then they just stop because it wasn't working anymore. So they can't get any food from me. Like, forget her, And then I even employed this tactic with black helicopters. This is where it gets interesting because it's not just about neg entity. You're talking about actual physical black helicopters. Like, and this is a big thing. And I talked about it in a book. Like, how is that possible? You got black helicopters hovering over you, trying to harass. So I had a things, my higher self again speak through me, told me to go into the middle of the room, into the middle of my studio apartment, and treat this like you would a negative entity attack. And I'm just like, what? And I'm all full of fear. No, just go in the middle of the room and just calm yourself, and just treat this like you would a negative entity attack. I'm like, okay. I'm thinking, this is a helicopter. How is this going to work? But I did that. I did exactly what it said. I closed my eyes, just completely leveled my frequency. And it's like, I just kind of raised myself up into an empowered sort of state of mind where I'm not scared of this anymore. And it's like almost like knowing your own self and becoming empowered. Not to sound goofy. It's almost like Neo at the end of the Matrix, when he puts his hand up and stops the bullets. It's kind of like that. And this thing that had been, the helicopter that had been hovering and going and going and going for almost 10 minutes, harassing me, as soon as I did that, immediately took off. And the next few black helicopter harassment that I experienced, I would do the same thing with the frequency shift, and they would take off. So, and then eventually it just completely stopped. So I never had another black helicopter again. So like the entities, it just faded out. Like, this isn't working anymore. The fear and the harassment, she's not taking it seriously. In fact, it was beyond not taking it seriously. At one point when the helicopter was following me as I was driving, I was like hanging out my window, taking pictures of it, and I had my radio going like, woo, whatever, and that was literally the last black helicopter incident I ever had. I was like laughing at it and taking pictures. So I don't know why it would work on black helicopters, but it's kind of telling, like maybe black helicopters aren't what we think they are. And that's what I talked about in my book. They may not be the strictly physical manifestations.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking too, because I had a situation before all of my stuff began, when I had my house in Tomball, and I was constructing, I was building a backyard, very tropical. I won't go into detail, but it was awesome. Made like an awesome waterfall, and I used all the stone and rock, and it was really cool. Tried to make it like a tropical paradise. Every day I would be out there. A black helicopter would fly over my house, and it would fly slowly over my house. And every time it would fly over me, I would feel a huge surge of irritation. So I would always give it the middle finger. And every day, it would happen. Every day I was out there. And I never really thought about that until literally just now, when you started talking about your black helicopter. Because, a lot of people, when you say manifestation and things like that, and when we talk about Matrix, we talk about reality as being like a software program. It's very easy for negative forces to change the code And when you change the code, you change reality. Kind of like David Icke had one time made a really good metaphor one time. He's like, oh, you see a web page. You go to a web page, and it's a beautiful web page, and it's got graphics, and it's got all this. But what makes that web page? Code does. You change the code, you change the web page. So same kind of thing with negative forces in reality. And these higher dimensional beings, they have such an innate understanding of frequency and vibration and the what would be the final rendering of the reality that we experience, so much so that they can, just like they do, use frequency to shift or like shapeshifters that we've all heard about, things like that. They could change and introduce these elements into our reality that we experience for certain reasons. Could be it showed up as a helicopter, could have been, could be something else to other people. That and if correct me if I'm wrong. So that's really interesting. Other things that we have talked about is religious concepts, and each religion has. And I know you and I and Tom, we all like Joseph Benner, and
actually, I'm not familiar with that.
You're not familiar with Benner's material? He's he was I know Tom because I had learned about him from Tom. He wrote the Ways to the Kingdom. I don't know if you've read that one. No.
Oh, maybe I do know who he is. I think I have heard that.
Yeah.
Maybe I just didn't recognize the name.
It was basically the application of what they called new thought towards old Christian religious concepts, and which the new thought representing understanding of energies and things like that. Just things that had evolved over the course of like 2,000 years, putting a modern mind on older literature. Anyways, now religion plays a role, and it does play a role, and because like you had said, even if you don't believe in these religious figures, they're real on some other level of reality, merely by the fact that where attention goes, energy flows, and energy also accumulates, collectively. And these belief systems are created based on our own expenditure of our own energy in believing, and we bring life to it. It becomes a real thing, and then other people's contribution to their own beliefs, or offering their own beliefs to that collective. And those, if they're of a positive polarization, or they represent a positive thing, then you will get a positive meaning from it. So for a lot of people, when they say things like Jesus saves, or even Buddha saves, it becomes a real thing to them, and it does have a positive impact. At the end of the day, it truly does. And you had mentioned that in this outline. I didn't mean to speak for you, but I was going to try to jump us from there and finish, because that was a really good point. I wanted to finish that one out because as much as a lot of people will attack religion, there are religions, like when you talk about Buddha and stuff like that, all of that is about positive thinking. It's about, there's lessons that Jesus gives in certain writings, that talk about perception management. Think about that story about the dog with the teeth. Everybody was like, oh my God, here's this dead dog and it looks horrible. And he's like, yeah, but it's got really nice teeth. You know what I mean? That's perception management 101. That's finding the positives in things, So, and it does, and it lends itself, but that doesn't mean everybody has to be religious or believe in these religious figures. At the end of the day.
No, like I've noticed just the idea of the Christ consciousness, like what it represents. The most highest level of altruistic love. Self-sacrifice, the whole thing, unconditional. Self-sacrificing love. That's what it represents. And, it doesn't matter whether Jesus existed or not. That concept is a valid concept. And you can just, try to tap into it to shift your frequency. It's a great mechanism for frequency shifting. Just focus on the idea of that. You don't have to be religious, you don't have to be Christian, but, just focus on the idea of that. And I've always too, it would be nice. And maybe Jesus was real, and it would be nice if he was. And if so, that's a great, it's almost unattainable for humans, but we can try. And I've noticed, and I've used it to help shift my frequency. One time I was under a psychic attack, and I had to lay down, and I just focused on that that whole thing, literally the Christ consciousness specifically and what it represents, and just try to feel it and tap into it. Just try to connect to it. And that vibe, connect to that vibe. And it raised my vibe so sky high. It was crazy. And then while I was doing this, I decided to do a return to sender of whatever this psychic attack was that was happening. But not returning to sender in a malicious way. And this is what I don't agree with a lot of people who try to counteract their psychic attacks. They come back from ×3 in a hateful way, like fight fire with fire. Like, I'm going to give your hate back to you.
Yeah, that's
like,
wrong. That's bigger.
I don't believe in that. I don't think you should. What if you turn their hate into the exact opposite, turn it into love and give that back to them? Like, that's what I tried to do. So I turned it around, like, wherever this is coming from, I want to, like, I tapped into that Christ consciousness feeling, you know, take whatever they did, wrap it up in a package, did a return to sender, intending ×3 positive.
Yeah.
And, you know, I want you to feel what I'm feeling right now. Whoever you are that is reaching out, trying to attack me, I want you to feel what good feels like. Maybe that'll help change you.
And it's interesting because it comes down to mathematics, if you think about it. And my wife and I talk about this a lot because my daughter will act out in a negative way. If my wife approaches it from a negative perspective, well, a negative plus a negative is what? It's a bigger negative. So if she's acting in a negative way, I said, try acting positive. What does a positive plus a negative do? It cancels it out. So, and then you can lay on more positive stuff. So it's really interesting. And it really, I have always looked at it that simple. And I wrote an article about that. And that really does seem to work. If you just approach everything from a positive, first of all, you have to ground yourself and be calm. And then from a positive perspective, you neutralize all this negative things that are happening. And it truly, and for a lot of these entities that they can't stand that, that's completely against what they want to, their goals are, you know?
And
so
I have experience with that too, like literally running away from me. I'm trying to like, no, I want you to feel what it feels like goodness. And they're like, ah, and like, no.
And also, you know, Edgar Casey had talked about this too. And he had mentioned that, you know, it doesn't matter if it's Jesus, it doesn't matter if it's Buddha, it doesn't matter if it's who, it doesn't matter what. If you visualize the positive symbols and you visualize the positive aspects of those positive symbols and you focus on that stuff, then you will increase your vibrations. I don't think he believed that he said that exactly, but he did believe, and that was what brought him at least into a calming, peaceful state and attached him to his higher self, was the visualization of positive symbols and stuff like that.
And in my case, after I did that return to sender ×3 positive, the end of that story was that this is back when I was participating on Tom's message board, Noble Realms. And the next day, some poster, some guy who was a member there, who I don't even know, I wasn't familiar with him, made a post talking about, oh my God, guys, last night at whatever time, and it was the exact time that I did this psychic attack removal thing that I just described. He was like, I was hit with the most intense positive feeling I have ever felt. And I'm like, this cannot be a coincidence. But what this said to me was, I don't even know who this guy was. I used to get a lot of psychic attacks through that forum. And that's a whole story in itself. And I had several forum members confirm that they felt negative forces coming through them, wanting them to attack me and come after me, and create trouble on the forum and just infuse negativity and fighting and distraction.
Tom told me all about it. Yeah, he said it was.
Oh, okay. So, you know, I'm thinking something was operating through this guy. He may not have even known it was. He may not have been conscious. So I don't even think he was conscious of trying to psychically attack me, but something through him was coming at, I don't know. It was just too coincidental, I think. And so that said to me that, wow, my return to sender, it seems like if this is what I think it is, it worked, you know. And he got hit. He said he just got whomped with the most positive thing he'd ever felt. And then I believe it. Yeah. So I'm thinking, oh, okay, well, thank you for outing yourself and letting me know what the source was of this attack.
Yeah, I remember back a while back, I was like, hey, let's create a forum together. And I was like, I'll moderate, I'll take care of it. And because I know he used to have one. He was like, no, thanks. He's like, the last time he did that, it was such an unbelievable headache being attacked by everybody and being attacked by people. And he just said the moderation duties were just too much.
Yeah, it took it physically. It's mental, emotional, and literal physical toll. So it's not fun when you're running a forum that's dealing with very high spiritual, metaphysical, conspiracy concepts. Yeah, you'll definitely be on the radar for attack for that.
I've seen. I participated a little bit on David Icke's forum, and that place, and you got. At first, I went on there. I was like, all right, David Icke. So they're all into this conspiracy stuff, you know, and I'm kind of like in India. I'm a new poster, so I'm Indiana Jones in my own mind, coming in there to save everybody, you know, and I'm like, oh my God, I just never experienced such a wide range of just angry, competitive people. I was mind blown. And And like a lot of times I'll like on these videos, I'll pay attention to the comments of the comment section, and it's just like, man, some people just want to pick a fight over the just, obviously something's probably behind them. Anyways, before I get too far, because I'm starting to feel the it's at 8:30 over here in Houston, which is 30 minutes away from my bedtime, since we have a little daughter and we all go to bed at the same time. And by the way, Carissa, thank you so much for all of your time, and Dr. Randall too for this show and allowing us to do this. I really appreciate that.
It's a wonderful show, and what a gift both of you are to everyone, because
I still wanted to go over one before we do close out. I still wanted to go over one quick section. So go back to you, Dr. Randall.
Yeah, no, but people needed to all know this. But no, I had all these just a few questions for but you both have answered them.
Yeah, so I'm saying our conversation is probably answering all the questions.
No, because I was gonna ask questions like, oh, you guys have answered it all. But you know that the for your friend James, you can try a few things with him. But one, if it's he has a negative attitude, and if it's toward someone, you can have him write that name down, or the person, and divide the paper in half and have a list of 5 things of why he really doesn't like this person, and another list of 5 things of why he does like this person. And what's he gonna find out is when he looks at those list of 10 things, all of those things relate to him.
Uh-huh.
You see, so that's what he's saying, and then for him is that a couple more things is that for my program is you turn your greatest adversity into your greatest opportunity, right? Or for him, have him try this. Have him smile for 5 minutes. Okay, it sounds weird, right? But smile, releases dopamine and endorphin, right? It's not. Well, I'm not in his shoes, but it's very difficult to be in a negative state when you're smiling. Like I said, oh, and I kill you, and I hate you, and I'm gonna just murder your wife. You can't do it. And so when he does that and he practices, because that negativity, whether it comes from dark energy or not, it's practiced. He's practiced. He's gotten good at it. Repetition, mother of skill. You get better at it. So he can practice being a good guy. He can practice feeling good. What does it feel like to feel good? Figure it out. What does it feel to feel? Okay, if I cut your arm, you're gonna say, "Ouch." That's not a nice thing. That feels bad. Okay, what does feel good? Smelling perfume, or being out in nature, or things like that, or having a great beer or something like that. But something like that. But if he just smiles, okay, and he goes, "Well, that's stupid." I said, "No, try it. Just smile." Okay, and you do that every day. The more you practice, okay, that more you raise your frequency, you raise your vibration. Okay, and so he can teach himself that, and this is regardless of the with all the negative entities out there, because he's reteaching them, and that is what you did, because what you did, instead of sending back fire with fire, you sent back love. And then if you're a demon or negative entity, you're going, the hell is this? This is acid. I don't want this. And maybe you can teach them, maybe not, but I think they might be pure evil. I don't know, but you just sent them love, which they're not used to, and so they're used to, and to me this is I would say just I can't say basic psychology, but it's you send someone that's attacking you, say you're fat, you're ugly, blah blah blah. This, he goes, hey, I love you anyway. So what else is there? Well, how come I can't piss you off? Well, you can't. You just can't, because once you stay neutral and grounded, okay. What Chris has done is that she's her higher self was talking to her in all these years, and you answered my question, because when I had read some of your stuff, that you're 15, 16, and you decided you want control of your life, and I go, how the hell do you do that? There's no one there to support you. And look at your brother and your 2 parents. They're something. Hey, I need your help. I feel this and all that. You get bashed, but somehow you came to that conclusion for you, that you wanted a different life. So I think way back when your higher self was already talking to you, and you chose that path.
Yeah.
But you could have gone down on that other path. you're gonna say fuck you to everyone and say, oh yeah, well I'm gonna screw all these 15 guys. Yeah, I'll show
I
them.
literally just didn't have it in me to be that. That's the thing. I didn't have it in me. I couldn't be that person.
That's right. You see what I mean? And so you have this goodness, because when you look at your entire family, look at those other three. Look where you are at. Okay, and
That's why I joke I'm the black sheep of the family as the good, positive.
It's amazing to me. And then since then, you research, and you've grown. And I think a higher self is something that you constantly grow, into, but never get there. And then that's in Japanese, it's called kaizen, constant growth, never-ending improvement. But that's what you're doing. And look what you've drawn to. You've become magnetic. And then you know that these things are out there, but see, well, one, with what you've done with the black copters is that you said, no, I don't care. I believe in me, and you guys can go away because you don't bother me. And so, life is the game. It's just a matter how you play it. And, Carissa, you're playing to win, and you're doing it. And, just a pleasure knowing you, and just read your stuff and finally meeting you and hearing your voice. Our world is a good place, and it's a better place because you're in it. And,
thank you.
I agree 100%. I'm a big fan of Carissa.
Your enlightenment, right? And then if you didn't do that, we would have never met, because you wouldn't have been the Patrick that you are now. Okay, you would have been that other Patrick. Okay, so your growth, that energy led me to, Bob sent me one of your articles. Like, I already read this. He's a good writer, but I don't care about the bankruptcy of America.
Oh, you're talking about my article, right?
Yeah. And then I read through that, and I go, yeah. He's a good writer, big deal, And so I come at the end. Well, I went through an enlightenment. I go, okay, now I'm interested in the guy. Okay, he wrote all this bullshit, which is, it's important. I go, but okay, I don't care about that. What is this path? What is this enlightenment thing? That's when I contacted you, and most people never contact me back, and you did. So so I benefited from that, and then now I got I got to meet Tom, I got to meet Steve Lyons, okay, I got to meet Roger Barr, and I got to meet Carissa. So I'm pretty darn lucky, And then,
awesome. Thank you, Dr. Randall.
Oh, thank you both here, because you guys are leaders in the world, and the mission of the show. And this, before I changed the name to it, when you came on, I put the new in front of it, right? But to educate, inspire, and empower individuals to live their greatest lives and highest expression, rich in love, peace, joy, harmony, abundance, gratitude, inclusion, and contribution. Okay, and maybe I was put on earth to do that. Okay, because I should be dead, but I'm not. And then because I'm not dead, I got to meet you both, and I'm damn grateful for that. And I got the best wife in the world, best kids, and then with just being alive, I'm more appreciative of that. I'm not really fond of the blindness at all, but that there's a God law, compensation and a sacrifice. If you want something, you got to sacrifice for it. If you want something, you got to work for it. And I believe in all of that. And with both of you, you both say two sides of the same coin, two sides of the same thing. And Raymond Hollywell, would say, that two sides of the same law. And it depends on what you choose, what your intention is, because intention has high frequency. And for you both, I listen to you, Chris, and your intention is clear. Okay, you know exactly where you're going, and then just to clarify at the end there, I think you already know what to do, and you're expert at it. Whatever happens to you, you send back love in volumes, and then guess what? All those bad things are either going to drown, choke, or get acid burn from love, because they're not used to it. Because you don't send back hate with hate. They go, oh, great, I got her.
Yeah, they win.
I got her.
That's what they want.
Yeah.
And I figured that out a long time ago. Like, that's all they want. That's another aspect I've noticed when you have these negative things that are operating through people attacking you. I noticed years ago, they love to see you get pulled down into the mud with the demons. They love that. As long as they get a rise out of you, make you throw you off your game, make you upset, they won. And then they got that glint and the smirk, and they're like, yeah, I gotcha. That's all they wanted. And so you don't give them that, and so I figured that out years ago.
Yeah, that's why I think you're expert at all this, because not only are you sensitive, intuitive, and aware, it's like Patrick, but you already know what your ammunition is. Let's send that, send you love. Okay, and you're not going to come bother me again because I know you hate it. So here is more of it. I love you more. You see, but I don't know. I've just learned so much from you, and I always learn from Patrick because he's kind of like my mentor. When I get kind of out of him, well, yeah, because I listen to you, and you're just calm. And if I'm something's bugging me, and I go, well, it's got to be like Patrick. He's just calm. I tell everyone to do that, but I don't do myself, so I'm really a big hypocrite, right? So that's what Patrick does. How come you can't do it? I said, well, I got to practice more. And then, he told me that you're going to be on a show. I said, wow, man, I got to ask her all this kind of stuff because she's so into this. And then, but yeah, like I said, you provide solutions for everyone out there because a lot of folks really don't know what's going on sometimes. I think for people like you and Tom, you can rewrite psychology. And then, like I was telling before, that the guy who created DSM-3 and DSM-4, named Alan Francis, was professor emeritus at the Duke University School of Psychiatry. He says, eventually psychiatry in the next 50 years is going to disappear because, there's no spiritual component to it, and he says, all we're doing is we're marking down symptoms, but we don't know why. Okay. And then, so he goes, drugs do work though. I go, I know about it. Come on, but for a short period of time. But drugs do work. I said, no, I don't want to argue with it. They're okay. Come on. But yeah, he even agreed that just that there's no spiritual or metaphysical side to this because he goes, all we're doing is writing down symptoms and we don't know why. And so what you and Tom bring up is that side that I think that will actually expand the name of psychology. Because how you educate folks in that way, it's not taught in any kind of, any of those books, psychology books, and I've read a lot of them. And it's all memorizing stuff, but we don't know why we're memorizing it. We just memorize all the symptoms, but they go, okay, so then what? Oh, well, we don't know what to do. Oh, okay, then you made me memorize all this stuff, but you don't know what to do. Oh, okay. So, but what you've given, Carissa, is our solution, a mindset and understanding. So I think for you and Tom both, you can rewrite those psychology books because it's not the same anymore. And I kind of have this coincide with what's going on now with this COVID thing. Fear, unknowing, trusting in something that's going to let you down, which is the government, okay? And not trusting in yourself. You trusted in yourself. You believed in you. Okay, and you said you're always had that positive attitude. Okay, a lot of people don't, but I think that can be learned. But I think a lot of people do have that positive attitude, but too scared, too afraid, to say, okay, I can do this, I can step over here. I'm good enough. I'm strong enough. And you did that when you're a teenager. Okay, and I can't imagine what you went through because I think it was just a lonely road. And yeah, you'd say, you're middle class, this and that, but, to be emotionally beat up like you were, that kind of stuff, as you know, is so acidic to anyone. And you could have gone the other way. You could have, become your brother. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't have it in me though. And I did have, I went through a bad period, like at around 16 to 17 years old, like when I was in 11th grade after we moved to California. That's when my mom's abuse just went off the rails because now she's divorced. There's nobody watching her anymore, so she's full free reign to do and say anything she wants. And she'd also disintegrated into vicious verbal abuse. Physical abuse. It had always been vicious verbal. Now it was physical, whatever. So I actually became, I was highly dissociated. In the worst state of mind I think I've ever been in my life. I mean, literally an entire week would be blacked out. I'd have no recollection of anything I did. I wasn't eating. I wasn't speaking most days to anybody. So I went from being that extroverted child who wouldn't shut up and I was getting in trouble all the time for talking too much to you couldn't get 2 words out of me. And I was almost, it sounds so dramatic, but to say almost like catatonic, but I wouldn't speak and I was just out of it. And I had this friend named Shirley, and I've talked about this on my website. She was from Israel. And for some reason, she just latched onto me like felt like she wants to be my friend and just stuck by me. And she was what single-handedly pulled me out of that. I was not in a good state. So it wasn't that I would have gone down a dark path like my brother. I literally didn't have it in me to do that, but I was in a bad mental state where I'm like dissociated, almost catatonic. I'm not speaking, blacking out days. And the worst case scenario was an entire week. Like I said, I had no recollection of an entire week. But I went to school and went to work apparently, but no recollection of it. So I'm just gone mentally and just completely disconnected from my reality. But she, despite that, she would just stick close by me. So she would be having one-sided conversations with me. We'd be sitting on the, in the quad during break, and she'd just be talking to me, and I'm sitting next to her, and I'm just like looking at nothing, not even talking. And she's just doing all the talking, and she would sing songs to me. She'd walk with me when we were going home together, because we lived in places that were right next to each other. Her apartment complex was next to the housing tract I lived in. And so we'd walk together. She'd insist on walking with me home. I don't know why. I was not a good friend. I had no personality. I was just out of it all the time. But she somehow felt like, I don't know what it was almost like an angel or something working through a person, and she just insisted on sticking by me, and being there. And then eventually I started, changing and pulling out of my shell. And so by 12th grade, it was all like turning around, and I was acting like a normal person, but I owe it to her for not giving up on me and just sticking by me, pulling me, inviting me to go with her and her friends, and just being a friend when I gave her no reason to be, and pulled me out of it. So yeah. So just to clarify, like I could never have been like my brother, but I could have gone down a bad psychological, black hole, So I've had help along the way. Like, that's why I think there's definitely good forces at work here. I want to reiterate that it isn't all negative. There's a lot of good, and they operate through people too.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's an example of that. So yeah.
I've experienced that too. Yeah, let's go ahead, and because we almost got a 3-hour show under our belts over here.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah, Carissa, I am so grateful. Thank you so much. Of course, you know how much I love you and Tom, and always want to do some more stuff with you guys in the future. So I will definitely reach out, and we talk all the time, so we'll talk. And thanks again so much. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you, Dr. Randall.
This is wonderful. And hey, everyone out there, we're kind of closing here, but you just stay tuned to this show and to the internet for Patrick's new show. Okay, so just keep that in mind, and please subscribe to the show on his channel.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that, Dr. Randall. All right, bye everybody. Thank you.
Bye.